Imagine a land of fierce extremes. A place where winters bite with relentless cold and summers blaze with scorching heat. This is Mongolia, unforgiving, vast, and desolate. Here, survival is as much a test of resilience as it is a daily battle for the nomadic tribes who call this harsh land home. It was within these rugged, windswept steppes that a child was born who would one day become one of the most feared and revered leaders in history. His name was Temujin. But Temujin's journey to greatness was not marked by royal bloodlines or noble birth. Instead, his early life was filled with hardship, betrayal, and survival against impossible odds. His father, Yusujia, was a respected leader of the Borjigin clan, but in the cruel politics of the Mongolian steppes, respect was always on shaky ground. And so, one day, when Temujin was just a boy, his father was poisoned by the rival Tatars, leaving his family alone and vulnerable. Temujin's life turned upside down that day. His mother, Holun, faced the reality of raising her children alone, without a tribe to protect them. Abandoned by their people, Temujin's family was left to fend for themselves in a world where only the strong survived. For years, they endured starvation, harsh winters, and the constant threat of attack. Temujin learned early that in order to survive, he had to be tougher, smarter, and more resilient than those around him. As he grew older, Temujin began to gather a small group of loyal followers. These were men who had also been cast out, who shared his hunger for something greater. He learned the power of loyalty and brotherhood, binding these men to him not through fear or brute force, but through bonds of respect and trust. It was this loyalty, earned in the fires of hardship, that would later serve as the foundation for his future empire. But the path was not without obstacles. In his early teens, Temujin was captured by a rival tribe, the Taichi-Udi, and held as a prisoner. Bound and treated as a slave, he tasted humiliation and helplessness. Yet, even in captivity, Temujin's mind was sharp. He bided his time, waiting for the perfect moment to escape. And when that moment came, he seized it with a ferocity that would become his hallmark. Temujin fled across the steppes, knowing that his life hung by a thread. But he survived, driven by a fire within him, a determination that refused to be extinguished. This ordeal left a deep mark on him, instilling a relentless drive to never be in such a position of vulnerability again. From that moment on, he knew he would either conquer or be conquered. There would be no middle ground. Over the years, Temujin began to unify the fragmented Mongolian tribes. He forged alliances, sometimes through marriage, sometimes through brute force, but always with a clear vision. He knew that unity was the only path to strength, and he was willing to do whatever it took to achieve it. Gradually, the name Temujin became feared and respected across the steppes. By his late 20s, Temujin had transformed himself into a formidable leader, a man whose presence commanded loyalty and respect. But he was no ordinary warrior. His mind was sharp, his strategies unparalleled. He understood that fear was as powerful a weapon as any sword, and he wielded it with precision. In 1206, after years of battles, alliances, and betrayals, Temujin succeeded in uniting the Mongol tribes under his leadership. He took on the title of Genghis Khan, meaning universal ruler. This title was more than just a name, it was a declaration of his ambition. Genghis Khan was no longer just a chieftain of a tribe. He was the ruler of an empire, a force that would soon unleash its fury upon the world. But Genghis Khan's vision extended beyond the borders of Mongolia. He saw a world ripe for conquest, a world divided by petty kings and squabbling empires. To him, this was weakness, an invitation to be conquered. And so, with a fierce determination, he began to plan his next move. Genghis Khan's rise from an outcast boy to the leader of a unified Mongolia was only the beginning. His empire was about to explode outward, sweeping across Asia with a ferocity that would change the course of history. But for now, let us linger in this moment, the moment where Temujin became Genghis Khan, the moment when the world stood on the brink of a storm unlike any it had ever seen. The year is 1207. Genghis Khan, now the undisputed leader of the Mongol tribes, stands at the precipice of an empire that will stretch across continents. His name carries with it the weight of a a promise that the world will tremble before the Mongols, that none shall stand in their way. The great unifier of the Mongols, Genghis Khan, is no longer content to rule just over the harsh steppes of Mongolia. His eyes have turned outward, toward the riches and power that lie beyond the borders of his homeland. The first target of his expansion is the empire of the Yuan Dynasty in northern China. It was the Yuan Dynasty that had humiliated the Mongols for centuries. Under their rule, Mongol tribes had been forced to pay tribute, their territories subjugated and divided. Genghis Khan, however, viewed this as an affront to his authority and the dignity of his people. To him, this was not just a matter of revenge, it was a matter of survival. If the Mongols were to thrive, they needed to break the chains of oppression and carve out a future for themselves. The Mongol forces, although vastly outnumbered by the Yuan dynasty's army, were led by Genghis Khan's genius. Unlike the sedentary armies of China, the Mongols were skilled horsemen, fast and maneuverable, able to strike with lightning speed and retreat before their enemies could mount a response. Genghis Khan's cavalry tactics were unparalleled, allowing them to harry their enemies from a distance, drawing them into traps, and then overwhelming them when they least expected it. The Yuan dynasty, although a powerful force in its own right, was too slow and entrenched in traditional warfare. Their armies were made up of heavy infantry, slow-moving siege engines, and the rigid strategies of old. In Genghis Khan, however, the Mongols found a general who could outwit them at every turn. Genghis was a master of psychological warfare, and he understood that it was not enough to defeat his enemies on the battlefield. He had to break their will to fight. It was here that Genghis Khan would begin his first campaign of conquest. The Mongols moved swiftly, capturing city after city with ease. Genghis Khan's forces employed a strategy of feigned retreats, drawing the Yuan forces out of their strongholds, only to turn and strike with overwhelming force. It was a tactic that the Yuan dynasty, accustomed to dealing with more predictable enemies, could not counter. The Mongols laid siege to the city of Zhongdu, modern-day Beijing, a stronghold of the Yuan dynasty. The siege was brutal and relentless. The city's walls, high and formidable, were no match for the Mongols' siege techniques. Genghis Khan's forces employed every trick in the book: catapults, trebuchets, and even psychological warfare. They sent spies into the city, spreading false rumors and causing chaos from within. As the days wore on, the defenders began to falter, their morale weakening. It was not long before the walls of Zhongdu began to crumble, and the Mongols poured in. When the city fell, it was a devastating blow to the Yuan dynasty. Genghis Khan had proven that he was not just a warlord, but a master tactician capable of defeating armies far larger than his own. The fall of Zhongdu was a turning point, not just for Genghis Khan, but for the world. It marked the beginning of a new era, one in which the Mongols would become the dominant power of Asia. But Genghis Khan was not content to stop there. The Yuan dynasty, though wounded, was still strong. Its capital city, Zhongdu, may have fallen, but the empire was far from defeated. Genghis Khan knew that to ensure victory, he would need to destroy the Yuan dynasty's ability to resist him completely. The Mongols, with their unmatched speed and ferocity, swept across northern China, capturing city after city. Genghis Khan's forces were like a storm, unstoppable and merciless. Every city that resisted was crushed. Every fortress that held out was torn down, its defenders slaughtered. Yet, even as Genghis Khan advanced, he maintained a strict policy regarding the treatment of civilians. He demanded that cities surrender without a fight, offering them peace in exchange for loyalty. Those that resisted, however, faced the full wrath of the Mongol forces. Genghis Khan understood that fear was a powerful tool, one that could save lives when wielded correctly. His reputation, now spreading across Asia, ensured that many cities surrendered without a fight, their leaders swearing allegiance to him in exchange for their survival. By 1215, the Yuan dynasty was in full retreat. The Mongols had captured their capital and much of their territory. Genghis Khan's conquests were not just about territory, they were about establishing the Mongol Empire as a force to be reckoned with. But even as he claimed victory in China, Genghis Khan's ambitions were far from complete. The rest of Asia was still ripe for conquest, and beyond Asia, there were kingdoms and empires that had never known the terror of the Mongols. Genghis Khan's forces, having crushed the Yuan Dynasty, turned their gaze westward. The stage was set for an even grander conquest, the campaign against the Khwarezmian Empire, a powerful kingdom to the west of the Mongol heartland. The Khwarezmian Empire, ruled by the Shah Ala ad-Din Muhammad, had made a grave mistake in insulting Genghis Khan's emissaries, a mistake that would cost them dearly. Genghis Khan had sent a small diplomatic mission to the Khwarezmian Empire, seeking to open trade and establish peaceful relations. But the Shah, seeing the Mongols as an insignificant threat, had the emissaries executed. This insult to Genghis Khan's honor would prove to be disastrous. Genghis Khan, furious, ordered a full-scale invasion of the Khwarezmian Empire. He would not be disrespected. The Mongols moved swiftly, conquering city after city, leaving a trail of devastation in their wake. The Shah's empire, once proud and powerful, was crumbling beneath the Mongol onslaught. By the time Genghis Khan reached the gates of the Khwarezmian capital, the empire had already been shattered. The Shah, in a desperate attempt to escape, fled westward, leaving his people to face the wrath of the Mongols. The Mongols would not stop until they had exacted full retribution for the murder of their emissaries. But for Genghis Khan, this campaign was not just about vengeance, it was a message to the world. The Mongol Empire was unstoppable. No one, no kingdom, no empire would be safe from its fury. It was an age of fear and conquest, and Genghis Khan was at the center of it all. As his forces closed in on the remnants of the Khwarezmian Empire, the world would soon realize that this was only the beginning of the Mongol conquests. And so, with each battle, each victory, Genghis Khan's name spread across the known world. The Mongol Empire, built on the foundations of a broken past, was becoming a reality. And as the empire grew, so did the legend of the man who had brought it into being. Genghis Khan was no longer just a man. He was an idea. And that idea would change the world forever. The year is 1218, and the world is on the brink of a cataclysmic shift. In the wake of his victories in the Yuan Dynasty, Genghis Khan's ambitions have not faltered. His empire, which now spans much of northern China, is hungry for more. To the west, beyond the Silk Road, lies the Khwarezmian Empire, a prosperous and powerful kingdom that has grown increasingly bold. Its ruler, Shah Ala ad-Din Muhammad, is about to make the mistake that will cost him everything. Genghis Khan had long been aware of the Khwarezmian Empire. Located at the crossroads of Central Asia, the Khwarezmian state was rich, influential, and strategically important, controlling key trade routes that connected the east and the west. But more than this, it was a kingdom that had a certain arrogance, a belief that they were too powerful to fear the Mongols. In 1218, Genghis Khan made the decision to open diplomatic relations with the Shah. He sent a caravan of merchants, along with a diplomatic delegation, to the Khwarezmian capital of Samarkand, hoping to establish peaceful trade relations. But the Shah, who had already heard whispers of the Mongols' military prowess, dismissed Genghis Khan's overtures. With an air of arrogance, the Shah ordered the caravan's merchants to be seized and killed. Worse still, the Shah's forces executed the Mongol ambassadors sent to him. In that moment, Shah Ala ad-Din Muhammad made a fatal error, a decision that would set the course of history into motion. Genghis Khan, a man known for his pragmatism and strategic foresight, did not take the betrayal lightly. To the Mongols, honor and loyalty were sacred. The execution of his men, especially those sent under a flag of diplomacy, was an insult not just to him, but to his entire empire. In Genghis Khan's mind, there could be no negotiation. The Khwarezmian Empire had sealed its fate. Within days, Genghis Khan mobilized his forces. His army, now a well-oiled machine of devastation, was ready for retribution. The Mongol horde, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, moved swiftly, cutting across the rugged terrain of the Central Asian steppes. Genghis Khan's army was unmatched in both its speed and organization. It consisted of highly disciplined cavalry, elite archers who could shoot with deadly accuracy while riding at full gallop, and siege units capable of bringing down the most fortified of cities. The Mongols' first target was the Khwarezmian city of Bokhara, a key cultural and religious center. The city was well fortified, with towering walls and a large population. The defenders, confident in their strength, believed that no force could breach their city. But they had underestimated the ferocity of Genghis Khan's army. When the Mongols arrived, they laid siege to the city, cutting off all supplies and using their unparalleled siege tactics to wear down the defenses. Days turned into weeks, and as the siege dragged on, the morale of the defenders began to erode. The Mongols, with their knowledge of psychological warfare, struck fear into the hearts of the people. They knew that the longer a city held out, the more desperate and demoralized the defenders would become. When the walls finally fell, the Mongols swept into the city like a storm, overwhelming the defenders and massacring the inhabitants. It was a brutal, savage display of power, a warning to any who would dare to resist. But the Mongols did not stop at Bokhara. Their next target was Samarkand, the jewel of the Khwarezmian Empire, known for its grand architecture and bustling markets. This city, however, would prove to be a far more difficult target. Samarkand was a symbol of the Khwarezmian Empire's might, and its defenses were formidable. But Genghis Khan's army was nothing if not relentless. The Mongols surrounded the city, cutting off all routes of escape. For weeks, they employed every tactic at their disposal: siege engines, underground tunnels, and psychological warfare, to wear down the defenders. The Mongols also understood the importance of deception. They employed a strategy of feigned retreat, drawing the defenders out of the city and into the open plains where the Mongols' superior cavalry could overwhelm them. It was a strategy that had worked time and again, and it worked again here. Slowly but surely, the defenders of Samarkand began to lose their resolve. When the city finally fell, the Mongols stormed the gates, and the city's inhabitants, who had once prided themselves on their wealth and culture, were slaughtered. As Genghis Khan moved through the Khwarezmian Empire, his army left a trail of destruction in their wake. The Mongols were not content with simply conquering; they sought to annihilate the empire that had dared insult them. Genghis Khan ordered the complete eradication of cities, wiping out entire populations to send a message to the world: betray the Mongols, and you will pay the price. In the aftermath of the Mongol conquests, the once mighty Khwarezmian Empire was in ruins. Shah Allah ad-Din Muhammad, in an attempt to save his empire, fled westward, but he could not outrun the Mongols. The Shah's flight was a futile one. His empire had been torn asunder, and Genghis Khan's wrath had shown no mercy. The Mongol campaign against the Khwarezmians was not merely about revenge, it was about establishing dominance. Genghis Khan's methods were ruthless, but they were also effective. Through fear, he had broken the Khwarezmian Empire, and the world had taken notice. The Mongol Empire was no longer just a rising power in the east, it was a juggernaut capable of bringing entire civilizations to their knees. And yet, Genghis Khan's thirst for conquest had not been quenched. As his army pressed forward, the Mongol Empire began to take shape, expanding into territories beyond Central Asia. It was not just an empire, it was a force that would change the world forever. Genghis Khan had proven that no empire, no matter how powerful, could withstand the wrath of the Mongols. The Khwarezmian Empire had fallen, but the legend of the Mongols was just beginning to spread. The world had learned a crucial lesson from the fall of the Khwarezmian Empire: defy Genghis Khan at your peril. His empire, forged in the fires of vengeance and ambition, would soon reach the farthest corners of Asia and beyond. The Mongols had become the most feared warriors the world had ever known, and Genghis Khan, their great leader, stood poised to conquer the world. By 1220, the Mongol Empire had already established its dominance over much of Central Asia, having crushed the Khwarezmian Empire with unparalleled brutality. But for Genghis Khan, his ambitions were far from fulfilled. His gaze had already turned to the eastern frontier, where the rich, fertile lands of the Song dynasty beckoned. Far to the south of Mongolia, the Song dynasty ruled over one of the most sophisticated civilizations of the time, with advanced technologies, prosperous cities, and vast resources. It was a kingdom whose influence stretched across much of China, a kingdom that had, for too long, ignored the threat posed by the Mongols. The Song dynasty, unlike the Jin or Khwarezmian empires, had been cautious in their dealings with Genghis Khan. They had heard the rumors of his brutal conquests, but they had chosen to remain aloof, hoping that the Mongols would focus their attention elsewhere. But Genghis Khan was not a man who allowed opportunities to slip away. The Song dynasty, though rich and powerful, had weaknesses, and Genghis Khan saw them clearly. Genghis Khan had learned the art of warfare in the unforgiving terrain of Mongolia, and he had perfected it with his campaigns against the Khwarezmian Empire. But this was different. The Song dynasty was not an empire of steppe warriors. Its strength lay in its wealth, in its culture, and in its cities that were heavily fortified. The Song rulers, however, had a significant disadvantage: they were divided. The southern Song dynasty was caught in a bitter rivalry with the Yuan Dynasty to the north, a dynasty that was still reeling from the Mongol onslaught. Genghis Khan would exploit this weakness, and like a storm, his forces would fall upon the Song in their moment of vulnerability. The Mongols began their campaign by first taking control of the northern regions of the Song dynasty. As they advanced southward, they encountered formidable resistance. The Song armies, while numerous, were less skilled in the art of mobile warfare, a critical disadvantage when facing the Mongol cavalry. The Mongols, on the other hand, excelled in hit-and-run tactics, striking swiftly and retreating before the enemy could regroup. It was a strategy that left the Song forces disoriented, unable to mount an effective defense. Yet, the Song dynasty was not without its own formidable tactics. The Song forces were well equipped with advanced siege weaponry and defensive systems that made them difficult to dislodge from their cities. But Genghis Khan had seen this before, and he knew how to overcome these obstacles. In one of his most brilliant campaigns, Genghis Khan used psychological warfare to sow fear and distrust among the Song defenders. He would often send spies to spread false rumors, causing panic among the civilian population. As unrest grew within the cities, the morale of the defenders began to crack. It was not just warfare that Genghis Khan employed to achieve his goals, it was also the manipulation of perception, the ability to make his enemies believe that their survival was only possible through surrender. His reputation alone had become a weapon more powerful than any sword. The city of Xiangyang, one of the Song dynasty's most important fortresses, was the first to fall. Despite its impressive walls and advanced defenses, the city's defenders were worn down by the relentless Mongol siege. For months, the Mongols cut off all supplies and systematically destroyed the city's infrastructure, making life impossible for its defenders. Genghis Khan's forces used every tool at their disposal: catapults, siege towers, and even expert engineers who tunneled beneath the city walls, undermining their foundations. The siege was a testament to the Mongols' resilience and their ability to wear down even the most determined defenders. When the city finally fell, it marked a significant victory for Genghis Khan, opening the path to the heart of the Song dynasty. However, even as his forces pressed southward, Genghis Khan understood that his empire's future would not solely be determined by military conquests. His greatest challenge was not just defeating the Song dynasty, it was integrating these vast, diverse lands into the Mongol Empire. For all his military genius, Genghis Khan was also a ruler who understood the importance of governance. He was determined to create an empire that was not only feared but also stable and prosperous. To accomplish this, Genghis Khan implemented a series of groundbreaking reforms that laid the foundation for the Mongol Empire's administration. He established a code of laws known as the Yasa, a set of rules that applied equally to all Mongols, regardless of rank. This was a system that emphasized discipline, loyalty, and merit, and it was designed to ensure the long-term cohesion of his empire. The Yasa was a reflection of Genghis Khan's belief that strength came from unity, and that all subjects, from the humblest farmer to the highest general, should be held accountable to the same laws. In addition to the Yasa, Genghis Khan also recognized the importance of trade and infrastructure. The Silk Road, the ancient network of trade routes that connected the east to the west, had long been a vital lifeline for the civilizations of Asia. Under Genghis Khan's rule, the Mongols worked to secure and expand these trade routes, making the Mongol Empire a center of commerce and cultural exchange. Genghis Khan also recognized the value of foreign knowledge, and he encouraged the exchange of ideas, technology, and culture between his empire and the outside world. Yet, despite his efforts at creating a unified empire, Genghis Khan was not a man of compromise. When the Song dynasty, battered and on the brink of collapse, refused to surrender, Genghis Khan's forces turned to a final, brutal campaign. In a series of decisive battles, the Mongols broke the Song resistance. The city of Hangzhou, the capital of the southern Song, fell in 1279, long after Genghis Khan's death. It would mark the culmination of the Mongol conquest of China, an event that would leave a lasting imprint on the history of the world. Genghis Khan's conquest of the Song dynasty was more than just another military victory. It was a key moment in his efforts to solidify the Mongol Empire as the largest contiguous empire the world had ever known. But this was not the end of his ambitions. His gaze turned further west, to the distant lands of the Islamic world, to Europe, and beyond. Genghis Khan was not content to conquer the known world. He sought to reshape it entirely. And as his empire expanded, so too did the legend of Genghis Khan. The world, already reeling from the Mongol onslaught, would soon face its next challenge, the unstoppable force that was Genghis Khan's Mongol Empire. The Mongol Empire, under the leadership of Genghis Khan, had become a force unlike any the world had ever seen. From the steppes of Mongolia to the walls of Samarkand, from the deserts of Central Asia to the rich lands of China, Genghis Khan's name had become synonymous with fear, power, and unyielding determination. But as the years passed and the conquests grew more distant, one question remained: what would become of the empire that he had built? Would it endure as a unified whole, or would the forces of division and rebellion tear it apart? Genghis Khan was now in the twilight years of his life. He had conquered most of the known world, and his empire stretched from the Pacific Ocean in the east to the Caspian Sea in the west. Yet, despite his immense power, Genghis Khan was not a man who believed in eternal rule. He knew that the key to his legacy would not be in the territories he conquered, but in the foundations he laid and the people he left behind. Unlike many conquerors who sought to amass wealth for themselves, Genghis Khan's primary goal was to build a lasting empire. He was not interested in the accumulation of riches for personal gain. Instead, his focus was on creating an empire that could endure for generations to come. This vision was reflected in the governance systems he put in place, systems that would shape the future of the Mongol Empire. Central to Genghis Khan's leadership was his belief in meritocracy. He did not rule through inherited titles or aristocratic privilege. Instead, he promoted individuals based on their ability, loyalty, and achievements. This was a revolutionary idea in a world where noble blood often determined a person's status. In the Mongol Empire, anyone, regardless of their background, could rise to the highest ranks, provided they proved their worth. This approach helped to create a sense of unity and loyalty among the Mongol people, who, unlike other empires, saw themselves as part of a meritocratic system rather than a rigid social hierarchy. But Genghis Khan's leadership was not limited to military conquest and administrative reforms. His true genius lay in his ability to adapt to new situations and learn from those around him. Unlike many conquerors who relied solely on brute force, Genghis Khan understood the value of knowledge and cultural exchange. He welcomed scholars, engineers, and artisans from all corners of the world, encouraging them to bring their expertise to the Mongol Empire. This influx of ideas and innovations, from gunpowder technology to advanced farming techniques, helped to strengthen the empire and increase its influence across the globe. As Genghis Khan grew older, however, the weight of his conquests began to take a toll. The endless campaigns, the constant need to expand his empire, and the stresses of governing a rapidly growing and diverse territory began to wear on him. His health began to decline, and in 1227, while on a campaign in the western Xia region, Genghis Khan fell ill. The precise cause of his death remains a mystery to this day. Some historians believe it was due to a wound sustained in battle, while others suggest it was a natural illness. The Mongols, ever pragmatic, did not allow his death to disrupt the momentum of their conquests. Before his passing, Genghis Khan had prepared for the eventuality of his death, ensuring that his empire would be passed on to his descendants. He divided his empire among his 4 sons, Jebe, Chagatai, Ogedai, and Talyui, and made sure that each would have the means and resources to continue his work. But even as Genghis Khan's empire appeared stable on the surface, the seeds of its eventual fragmentation had been sown. Genghis Khan's empire, vast and diverse, was always bound by a delicate balance. The unity that had existed under Genghis Khan's leadership was largely due to his personal charisma and ability to hold the empire together. His descendants, however, did not possess the same level of leadership or vision. The Mongol Empire was divided into several khanates, each ruled by different branches of Genghis Khan's family. While they continued to expand and conquer new territories, the unity that had once defined the Mongols began to erode. In the years following Genghis Khan's death, his sons and grandsons would struggle to maintain control over the empire. Ogdi Khan, Genghis Khan's third son, succeeded his father as the Great Khan and continued the Mongol conquests, most notably invading Eastern Europe and defeating the Kingdom of Hungary and Poland. Under Ogdi's rule, the Mongols reached the height of their power. However, the empire was increasingly marked by internal strife as factions within the Mongol leadership vied for control. Rivalries between Genghis Khan's descendants, the succession crises, and the challenges of governing such a vast and diverse empire made it increasingly difficult to hold the Mongol world together. As the years passed, the Mongol Empire slowly began to fracture into separate khanates: the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Golden Horde in Russia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Yuan Dynasty in China, founded by Genghis Khan's grandson, Kublai Khan. Each khanate, though still nominally part of the larger Mongol Empire, operated largely independently, and the bonds that once held them together began to weaken. Despite the eventual fragmentation of his empire, Genghis Khan's legacy endured. His conquests reshaped the world in profound ways. The Silk Road, once again open to trade, flourished under Mongol protection, allowing for the exchange of goods, ideas, and culture between East and West. The Mongols brought significant advancements in technology and science to Europe, including gunpowder and printing techniques, which would later play a key role in the development of the Renaissance. But perhaps Genghis Khan's most lasting legacy was the empire he created, an empire that spanned much of Asia and Eastern Europe, and whose influence would be felt for centuries. His ability to unite a vast, diverse group of peoples under one banner, to create a sense of loyalty and unity in the face of overwhelming odds, was an achievement unlike any other. His empire, though divided in the years after his death, remains one of the largest in history. Genghis Khan, the man who had once been a poor, outcast child on the Mongolian steppe, had become one of the most powerful and influential leaders the world had ever known. His name would live on for centuries, a symbol of the power of ambition, strategy, and vision. And though the Mongol Empire would eventually crumble, Genghis Khan's legacy would forever be etched in the annals of history. Genghis Khan may have passed into history, but the empire he created did not die with him. His descendants, though divided by time and space, would continue to wield the power of his name, and the Mongol Empire, despite its fragmentation, would remain a monumental force in world history for centuries to come. The story of Genghis Khan's empire is not just one of conquest and destruction, but one of creation, transformation, and long-lasting influence on the course of civilizations. Following Genghis Khan's death in 1227, the Mongol Empire was divided into several distinct khanates, each ruled by his sons or grandsons. These khanates, though they operated with considerable independence, were bound together by a common Mongol identity and, to a large extent, by the shared legacy of Genghis Khan. His sons, Ogdi, Chagatai, Jebe, and Talyui, each continued his work, expanding the empire's borders even further. Ogdi Khan, Genghis Khan's third son, succeeded his father as the Great Khan and continued his father's policy of military expansion. Under his leadership, the Mongols launched further campaigns westward, extending their reach into the heart of Europe. In 1241, the Mongols defeated the combined armies of Poland and Hungary in the Battle of Mohi, creating a path for future Mongol invasions of the European continent. The Mongol presence in Eastern Europe, however, was short-lived, as Ogdi's death in 1241 prompted a retreat, and the Mongol hordes turned their attention back to the east. But even in these brief forays, the Mongols had already laid the groundwork for future connections between the East and West, an enduring legacy that would shape global history. While the Western Khanates focused on military conquests, the eastern territories of the Mongol Empire saw significant cultural and administrative developments. The Yuan Dynasty, established by Genghis Khan's grandson, Kublai Khan, marked the zenith of Mongol influence in China. Kublai Khan, a ruler of both Mongol and Chinese heritage, sought to merge Mongol traditions with the ancient culture of China. His reign brought profound changes to Chinese society, including the integration of Mongol military practices with Chinese governance systems. Kublai's Yuan dynasty saw significant advances in infrastructure, trade, and culture. The Grand Canal, which connected northern and southern China, was expanded, facilitating the movement of goods and people. Under Kublai Khan, China's economy flourished, and the empire became a hub for the Silk Road trade, linking China with the Middle East and Europe. Perhaps the most lasting legacy of the Mongol Empire was its role in facilitating cross-cultural exchange. Genghis Khan had opened up the Silk Road and ensured its safety under Mongol rule, allowing merchants, scholars, diplomats, and travelers from all over the world to move freely between East and West. This exchange would lead to the spread of technologies, ideas, and goods that would change the world forever. Gunpowder, paper, and printing, technologies that had been developed in China, spread westward and became critical to the development of European civilizations. The Mongols themselves were instrumental in bringing Islamic knowledge to the West, introducing the sophisticated mathematical concepts, astronomy, and medicine of the Islamic Golden Age to Europe. The legacy of the Mongols was also felt in the military innovations they introduced. The Mongol cavalry, with its swift and deadly archers, revolutionized warfare across Eurasia. Mongol tactics were studied by European and Middle Eastern armies, and their emphasis on speed, mobility, and psychological warfare had a lasting influence on military strategy. While the Mongol Empire's cultural impact was profound, its geopolitical consequences were also far-reaching. The Mongol conquest changed the political landscape of Eurasia. In the Middle East, the Ilkhanate, one of the Mongol Khanates, brought an end to the Abbasid Caliphate in 1258, when Hulagu Khan sacked Baghdad, a tragedy that devastated the Islamic world. But the Mongols also contributed to the revival of trade and the spread of knowledge across the Islamic world. In Russia, the Golden Horde ruled for centuries, shaping the development of the Russian state and its eventual rise to power under the Tsars. The Mongols' influence in Eastern Europe was less direct, but no less significant. The Mongols created a buffer zone between the growing power of Russia and the rising empires of Western Europe, preserving the independence of Slavic peoples for generations. At the same time, the presence of the Mongols in Russia delayed the rise of a centralized Russian state, a factor that would influence the political development of Russia for centuries. Despite the remarkable achievements of the Mongols, the empire that Genghis Khan had built was not immune to the forces of fragmentation. The vastness of the empire, coupled with internal divisions and rivalries among Genghis Khan's descendants, led to the eventual disintegration of Mongol rule. By the late 14th century, the Mongol Empire had fractured into smaller states, each with its own leadership and priorities. The decline of the Ilkhanate in Persia, the fall of the Yuan dynasty in China, and the collapse of the Golden Horde in Russia were all signals that the age of Mongol dominance was coming to an end. However, the Mongols' influence would be felt long after the empire had broken apart. The world that Genghis Khan had created, a world connected by trade, culture, and military innovation, had changed forever. The global connections fostered by the Mongols laid the groundwork for the rise of the modern world. The exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies between East and West during the Mongol period paved the way for the Renaissance in Europe and the eventual rise of global trade networks. Even today, the legacy of Genghis Khan can be seen in the political, cultural, and economic landscapes of the nations that were once part of his empire. From the remnants of the Mongol Khanates in Central Asia to the continued cultural exchange between East and West, the imprint of Genghis Khan's reign endures. Genghis Khan's story is not just one of conquest and violence. It is the story of a man who defied the odds, united disparate tribes, and created an empire that stretched across the globe. His military genius, his vision for a united world, and his ability to govern a vast and diverse empire have ensured that his legacy endures. In the annals of history, Genghis Khan will forever be remembered as one of the greatest leaders the world has ever known, a man whose empire reshaped the world in ways that are still felt today. Throughout history, the figure of Genghis Khan has been both revered and vilified. To some, he is a national hero, a symbol of unity, strength, and Mongol identity. To others, he represents the terror of conquest, the destruction of cultures, and the relentless pursuit of empire. The man behind the myth is a complex and enigmatic figure, and as his story has passed through the ages, it has become a canvas onto which various cultures have projected their own interpretations. The story of Genghis Khan, like many great historical figures, is shrouded in myth. As one of the most successful military leaders in history, his name has been remembered through tales of his unstoppable conquests, his unyielding will, and his ability to unite a vast and diverse empire. Yet, much of what is written about him is colored by the lens of the cultures that he conquered. In the lands he invaded, particularly in Europe and the Middle East, Genghis Khan was seen as a symbol of fear and destruction. The first European accounts of the Mongols came from the crusading armies that encountered them in the 13th century. For these Western observers, Genghis Khan and his descendants were monstrous figures, barbarians who swept through cities with terrifying speed, leaving destruction in their wake. Chroniclers described the Mongols as savage warriors who spared no one, men, women, or children. This image of Genghis Khan as a ruthless destroyer persisted in European literature for centuries. In the Middle East, the perception of Genghis Khan was similarly shaped by the Mongol invasions. In 1258, when Hulagu Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson, sacked Baghdad and killed the last Abbasid caliph, the Islamic world was thrown into disarray. The fall of Baghdad marked the end of the Islamic Golden Age and was seen as a catastrophic event. To many in the Middle East, Genghis Khan and his descendants became synonymous with devastation. Yet, despite the bloodshed, the Mongols also brought with them new ideas and technologies, and in some areas, the Islamic world would eventually come to see the Mongols as both conquerors and contributors to the spread of knowledge. The Mongol invasions, then, were not simply acts of violence but the catalyst for cultural exchanges and transformations. But in the eyes of their enemies, Genghis Khan and his successors were often portrayed as unrestrained conquerors, motivated solely by greed and bloodlust. These depictions of Genghis Khan, particularly in the West, would shape his image for centuries to come. However, in Mongolia, the narrative is vastly different. For the Mongols, Genghis Khan is a national hero, the founding father of the Mongol nation. His rise from the humble origins of a boy born into a broken family to the leader of the world's greatest empire is seen as a story of resilience, leadership, and vision. In Mongolia, Genghis Khan is remembered as a man who united a fractured people and gave them a sense of pride and purpose. His legacy is one of strength, honor, and the enduring spirit of the Mongol people. This reverence for Genghis Khan can be seen in the modern-day celebrations of his life. Every year, the people of Mongolia hold grand festivities in honor of their great Khan, with parades, dances, and ceremonies that celebrate his achievements. Statues of Genghis Khan stand proudly across Mongolia, with the most famous being the giant equestrian statue just outside the capital, Ulaanbaatar. This statue, standing at over 40 meters tall, symbolizes the enduring legacy of Genghis Khan as a national icon, a figure whose story has shaped the identity of Mongolia for over 8 centuries. The reverence for Genghis Khan in Mongolia is not just a matter of historical pride, it is a deep connection to a national identity that has endured despite centuries of foreign rule, war, and political upheaval. For the Mongols, Genghis Khan represents the epitome of what it means to be Mongol, a fierce warrior, a unifier, and a leader who transcended the limitations of his time. His image is not one of destruction, but of creation, the creation of an empire that would span the known world. Yet, even in Mongolia, the myth of Genghis Khan has evolved over the years. In the modern era, his image has been used in various ways, sometimes as a symbol of national pride and unity, and at other times as a political tool. Under the rule of the communist government in the 20th century, Genghis Khan's image was at times downplayed, as the Mongolian People's Republic sought to align itself with Soviet ideologies that rejected traditional monarchies and feudal systems. However, with the fall of communism in 1990 and the rise of democratic reforms, Genghis Khan's legacy has been embraced once again as a cornerstone of Mongolian identity. Outside of Mongolia, Genghis Khan's legacy has continued to be debated and reassessed. In modern-day China, Genghis Khan is recognized as one of the founding figures of the Yuan Dynasty, a dynasty that played a significant role in Chinese history. His reign is seen as a time of prosperity and innovation, particularly in the areas of infrastructure, trade, and culture. The Yuan Dynasty is remembered for its efforts to integrate Mongol and Chinese traditions, creating a cultural fusion that would shape the future of China for centuries to come. In the West, Genghis Khan's image has undergone a gradual transformation. Once viewed primarily as a barbaric conqueror, modern historians and scholars have begun to recognize the complexity of his reign. Far from being a mindless destroyer, Genghis Khan was a strategic and visionary leader who reshaped the political and cultural landscape of Eurasia. His empire brought with it significant advancements in communication, trade, and military technology. The Mongol postal system, for example, was an incredibly efficient network that allowed for rapid communication across vast distances, something unprecedented in the medieval world. The legacy of Genghis Khan is also evident in the global spread of Mongol culture. The Mongols helped facilitate the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies between East and West, ushering in an era of global connectivity that would have far-reaching consequences. The opening of the Silk Road under Mongol protection allowed for the movement of people, goods, and knowledge, setting the stage for the eventual rise of the Renaissance in Europe and the scientific revolution. Despite the passing of centuries, the legacy of Genghis Khan endures in the collective memory of the world. His name is still synonymous with power, ambition, and conquest. But as history continues to unfold, his image continues to evolve, shifting from that of a ruthless conqueror to that of a brilliant strategist and unifier. Whether as a symbol of fear or of pride, Genghis Khan's impact on the world is undeniable. His legacy lives on, not only in the lands he conquered but in the very fabric of history itself. The Mongol Empire was the largest contiguous empire in world history, a sprawling network that stretched from the Korean peninsula in the east to the plains of Hungary in the west. And though Genghis Khan himself died in 1227, the strategies he employed, the innovations he introduced, and the policies he set in motion would have a profound impact on both the world of his time and the centuries that followed. Today, Genghis Khan's legacy is still felt in military strategies, governance, trade, and global diplomacy. His empire, though fractured, laid the foundations for a new world order. Genghis Khan's genius in warfare was a driving force behind the Mongol success and, perhaps unsurprisingly, continues to influence modern military tactics. At the heart of Genghis Khan's military strategy was his revolutionary use of cavalry, particularly his mastery of the mounted archer. The Mongol warriors were not just skilled horsemen, they were disciplined, highly trained, and above all, mobile. The Mongols could move quickly, strike decisively, and retreat just as rapidly, often before their enemies could mount an effective response. This flexibility and mobility were central to their military success. In addition to their cavalry, the Mongols were pioneers in psychological warfare, using fear as a weapon to destabilize their enemies. They would deliberately spread rumors of their brutality and ruthlessness, creating panic and confusion long before the first arrow was even fired. This psychological edge often gave them the advantage, as enemies would surrender without a fight, fearful of what might befall them if they resisted. Many modern military strategies still draw upon Mongol principles of speed, psychological warfare, and adaptability. The use of highly mobile units that can outmaneuver and outthink their enemies is a concept that continues to shape the tactics of contemporary armies. In particular, the Mongol reliance on quick strikes, surprise attacks, and decentralized command structures resonates in modern forms of warfare, especially in special forces operations. The ability to strike fast and hard, often behind enemy lines, was a hallmark of Mongol success, and it remains a critical component of modern military doctrine. But Genghis Khan's influence did not stop at military tactics, it extended deeply into the realm of governance. One of the greatest accomplishments of his reign was his ability to administer an empire of unprecedented size and diversity. The Mongol Empire spanned multiple cultures, languages, and religions, and yet Genghis Khan was able to establish a system of governance that allowed for relative stability across these vast lands. He recognized the importance of effective administration, particularly in managing the various peoples he had conquered. He created a legal system known as the Yasa, which was a code of laws that applied to all Mongols, regardless of their social status. The Yasa was intended to ensure order within Mongol society and provide a foundation for the governance of the empire. Its principles of military discipline, loyalty, and respect for authority became the bedrock of Mongol society and its expansion. Moreover, Genghis Khan's policies on religious tolerance were groundbreaking for the time. Unlike many rulers of his era, who sought to impose a single religion upon their subjects, Genghis Khan embraced a policy of religious freedom. He understood that the diverse peoples he ruled held different beliefs, and he believed that each religion should be allowed to flourish without interference from the state. This policy not only helped to prevent religious strife within the empire but also fostered a sense of unity among the various peoples who lived under Mongol rule. In many ways, Genghis Khan's ability to manage his empire was ahead of its time. He established a sophisticated system of communication, using mounted couriers and relay stations to ensure the rapid movement of information across the empire. The Mongol postal system was one of the most advanced in the medieval world, allowing for quick and efficient communication between the farthest reaches of the empire. Following Genghis Khan's death, his descendants continued many of his policies, particularly in terms of governance. His grandsons, Kublai Khan and Hulagu Khan, carried on his vision of a unified, multi-ethnic empire. Kublai Khan, in particular, sought to consolidate Mongol power in China by establishing the Yuan Dynasty. His reign saw the continuation of Genghis Khan's policies of religious tolerance, while also encouraging the growth of trade and commerce, which helped to integrate the Mongols into the global economy. The influence of the Mongols extended far beyond the military and political spheres. The empire they created became a conduit for cultural exchange, commerce, and the spread of knowledge. The Mongol Empire revitalized the Silk Road, the ancient network of trade routes that connected East and West. Under Mongol protection, merchants, scholars, and travelers moved freely across the empire, facilitating the exchange of goods, technologies, and ideas. It was during the Mongol period that the world saw an unprecedented exchange of knowledge between the East and West. Chinese gunpowder technology, papermaking techniques, and printing technologies were introduced to Europe, which had a profound impact on European science, warfare, and culture. Similarly, the Mongols brought with them Islamic scholarship, mathematics, and astronomy, which would later play a pivotal role in the European Renaissance. The political and economic stability established by the Mongols also enabled the flourishing of international trade. The Mongols were instrumental in creating a unified economic zone that stretched from China to the Middle East and Eastern Europe. The Pax Mongolica, or Mongol Peace, as it is often called, facilitated the free flow of goods and ideas across vast distances. The Mongol Empire also promoted the movement of people, particularly skilled artisans, engineers, and scientists, who helped to improve infrastructure and foster innovation across the empire. In Russia, the Mongols had a profound impact on the development of the Russian state. The Mongol domination of Russia, which lasted for several centuries, helped to shape the political structure of the Russian Empire. The centralized nature of Mongol rule was mirrored in the eventual rise of the Russian Tsarist system, and many of the Russian nobility adopted Mongol customs and governance practices. In the Islamic world, the Mongols played a significant role in shaping the political and cultural development of the region. The Ilkhanate, a Mongol state in Persia, contributed to the transmission of Persian and Islamic culture to China, and vice versa. Even after the collapse of the Mongol Empire, the cultural and economic connections between the East and West persisted, largely thanks to the groundwork laid by Genghis Khan and his descendants. While the Mongol Empire itself eventually fragmented and collapsed, its legacy endured in the political, cultural, and economic systems it left behind. The exchange of ideas, goods, and technologies during the Mongol period created a foundation for the interconnected world we live in today. Genghis Khan, with his military genius, visionary leadership, and innovative governance, laid the groundwork for the globalized world that would emerge in the centuries following his death. Despite its vastness and power, the Mongol Empire was ultimately unable to endure as a unified whole. The seeds of its decline were planted in the years following Genghis Khan's death in 1227, as his successors inherited an empire that was as sprawling as it was fragmented. The same qualities that made the Mongol Empire a force to be reckoned with, its vastness, its diversity, and its decentralized nature, also sowed the seeds of its collapse. When Genghis Khan died, he left behind an empire that was divided among his sons and grandsons. His 4 sons, Jebe, Kublai, and Hulagu, each ruled different regions of the empire, but none of them were able to maintain the unity that their father had achieved. The Mongol Empire was split into several khanates: the Yuan Dynasty in China, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Golden Horde in the Russian steppes. Each of these khanates, while still under the nominal control of the Mongol family, was increasingly autonomous, and in many cases, the leaders of these khanates became more concerned with their own power and interests than with maintaining the unity of the empire. The decline of the Mongol Empire was also accelerated by external pressures. As the centuries passed, the Mongol khanates faced increasing resistance from the peoples they had once conquered. In China, the Yuan dynasty faced growing discontent from the Chinese population, who resented Mongol rule. The Yuan dynasty was eventually overthrown by the Ming dynasty in 1368, signaling the end of Mongol rule in China. In Persia, the Ilkhanate collapsed after a series of weak rulers and internal struggles, and the Chagatai Khanate was divided by infighting and the rise of local warlords. Meanwhile, in the Russian steppes, the Golden Horde, which had once dominated the region, was slowly disintegrating under the pressure of internal division and the rise of the Russian state. The fall of the Golden Horde in the 15th century marked the end of Mongol influence in Russia, and by the time the empire fell apart, the world had changed. New powers had risen, and the world that Genghis Khan had once conquered was no longer the same. But even as the Mongol Empire began to crumble, the legacy of Genghis Khan endured. His descendants continued to rule many of the regions he had conquered, and the principles of Mongol governance, religious tolerance, meritocracy, and a sophisticated communication system continued to influence the political structures of the regions they had once ruled. Even in the territories where Mongol rule had ended, the impact of Genghis Khan's empire could still be felt. One of the most lasting impacts of Genghis Khan's reign was the promotion of trade and cultural exchange. Under the Mongols, the Silk Road flourished, and the movement of goods, ideas, and people between East and West reached unprecedented levels. The Mongols facilitated the exchange of technologies, including gunpowder, papermaking, and printing, which would go on to shape the course of history. In the centuries following the fall of the Mongol Empire, the Silk Road continued to be a vital conduit for trade and cultural exchange. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of Genghis Khan's empire was the idea of the Mongol state itself, the notion of a multi-ethnic, multi-religious empire that stretched across the vast Eurasian landmass. Even after the collapse of the Mongol Khanates, the concept of a vast empire uniting different peoples continued to influence the political imagination of future generations. The idea of a unified Eurasia, under a single ruler or a series of allied states, remained an ideal that many sought to achieve. The collapse of the Mongol Empire, though significant, did not mark the end of Genghis Khan's influence. His name continued to resonate across the centuries, not just in the lands he had conquered, but across the world. In Mongolia, his legacy remained a source of national pride, and over the centuries, the myth of Genghis Khan had only grown stronger. His image became synonymous with the spirit of the Mongol people, indomitable, resilient, and determined to survive. In the 20th century, Genghis Khan's legacy was revived once again. In Mongolia, after centuries of foreign rule and Soviet influence, Genghis Khan became a symbol of national pride and unity. His image was used to rally the Mongol people as they sought to regain their independence and identity. In the years following the fall of the Soviet Union, Genghis Khan's legacy was embraced once again as the foundation of Mongolia's national identity. But Genghis Khan's influence was not confined to Mongolia. In the centuries following his death, his story was told and retold in many different cultures, often taking on new meanings. In Russia, Genghis Khan was remembered as a founding figure of the Russian state. In China, his descendants, particularly Kublai Khan, were celebrated for their contributions to Chinese culture and governance. In the West, the image of Genghis Khan gradually shifted from that of a barbarian conqueror to that of a military genius and visionary leader. Even in the modern world, Genghis Khan's influence can still be felt. His name is known across the globe, and his legacy is studied by historians, military strategists, and scholars alike. His reign left an indelible mark on the world, shaping the course of history in ways that continue to reverberate today. As we reflect on the rise and fall of the Mongol Empire, we are reminded that the legacy of Genghis Khan is not just one of conquest and destruction, but also one of cultural exchange, political innovation, and the enduring power of the human spirit. His empire, though fragmented and ultimately dissolved, set the stage for a new world order, one in which the boundaries between East and West, the nomadic and the settled, would forever be altered. Genghis Khan's empire may have fallen, but his story, the story of a young boy who rose from the ashes of a broken family to become the ruler of the largest empire the world has ever known, remains one of the most compelling in human history. His influence, though fading in some corners of the world, endures in others. And in Mongolia, where his legend began, the spirit of Genghis Khan continues to inspire the people who carry his name into the future. In the heart of Mongolia, Genghis Khan's legacy is woven into the very fabric of the nation. His name is not merely a historical figurehead, it is a symbol of resilience, unity, and national pride. In this land, which once echoed with the thunder of hooves and the clash of swords, Genghis Khan has become a mythic figure, his image immortalized in statues, monuments, and the hearts of the Mongol people. For the Mongol people, Genghis Khan is more than just a conqueror. He is a founding father, a unifier who brought together the disparate Mongol tribes and forged an empire that spanned the known world. His rise from the hardships of his early life, from being born into a broken family to becoming the ruler of the largest contiguous empire in history, has turned him into a symbol of perseverance against all odds. The Mongols, for whom the steppe is both home and sanctuary, revere Genghis Khan not just for his military genius, but for his vision of a unified Mongol people. The Mongol Empire may have fractured in the centuries after his death, but his legacy lives on, deeply embedded in the national consciousness of Mongolia. Today, the image of Genghis Khan looms large over the capital city of Ulaanbaatar, where a giant equestrian statue of him stands proudly, overlooking the land that once belonged to his empire. Yet Genghis Khan's legacy is not confined to Mongolia alone. Over the centuries, his name has traveled far beyond the steppes of Central Asia, entering the mythologies, histories, and imaginations of countless cultures. From Russia to China, from the Middle East to Europe, Genghis Khan's story has been retold, adapted, and mythologized. His image, often shifting, sometimes villainous, sometimes heroic, has taken on many forms, reflecting the complexities of his legacy. In the West, for example, Genghis Khan's image has often been associated with brutality, destruction, and conquest. His sweeping campaigns across Asia, his devastating sieges, and his reputation for fearsome tactics have made him a figure of legend, one whose name is synonymous with ruthless conquest. For centuries, European writers, chroniclers, and historians have painted Genghis Khan as the quintessential barbarian conqueror, a symbol of the uncontrollable, violent forces that once threatened the boundaries of the civilized world. But as the centuries passed, the narrative surrounding Genghis Khan began to evolve. In the 19th and 20th centuries, scholars and historians began to re-examine his role not only as a conqueror but also as a visionary ruler. They saw in him a brilliant strategist, an innovator who brought new ideas to governance, military strategy, and cultural exchange. His empire, though short-lived in its unity, had opened up trade routes and created a space for dialogue between East and West. The legacy of his empire, some argued, was not one of devastation, but one of exchange, a fusion of cultures, technologies, and ideas that would lay the groundwork for the interconnected world we know today. In Mongolia, however, the myth of Genghis Khan has always remained tied to national identity. To the Mongols, Genghis Khan represents something deeper than just a figure of conquest. He is the embodiment of Mongol strength, determination, and unity. He is the great unifier, the one who transcended tribal divisions and built a nation that stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the heart of Europe. The Mongol people view him as a symbol of national pride, a hero who brought them glory and prosperity, no matter the cost. But even within Mongolia, Genghis Khan's legacy is not without its complexities. Over the centuries, his image has evolved to reflect the changing times. Under Soviet rule in the 20th century, Genghis Khan's legacy was suppressed, viewed with suspicion due to his association with Mongol nationalism and independence. Soviet authorities promoted a more internationalist, socialist view of history, and Genghis Khan's memory was relegated to the past. Yet even under Soviet rule, Genghis Khan's legend could not be entirely erased. His name and image remained in the hearts of the Mongol people, who continued to honor him as a national hero, even if they could not publicly celebrate his legacy. The fall of the Soviet Union in 1991 marked a turning point for Mongolia. The country regained its independence, and with it, a renewed sense of pride in its heritage. In the years following the collapse of communism, Mongolia began to embrace Genghis Khan's legacy more openly. The rise of the Mongol people's sense of national identity and the rebirth of Genghis Khan's mythic status coincided with a new era of freedom and independence. Today, Genghis Khan is the central figure in Mongolia's national identity. His image is seen not only in monuments and statues but also in the cultural and political life of the country. Mongolian leaders regularly invoke his name, and the principles of unity, strength, and leadership that he exemplified are seen as guiding ideals for the modern nation. Genghis Khan's reign, while marked by war and conquest, is also remembered for its visionary policies, his promotion of religious tolerance, the establishment of a meritocratic government, and the creation of a communication network that spanned the empire. Even beyond Mongolia, Genghis Khan's legacy continues to inspire admiration, study, and debate. His story, marked by both glory and bloodshed, has captivated scholars, writers, and filmmakers for generations. In the West, many see him as a military genius whose tactics still influence modern warfare. In the East, he is often viewed as a founding father, a figure who laid the foundations for future dynasties and whose policies shaped the course of Chinese, Russian, and Persian history. Perhaps the most enduring aspect of Genghis Khan's legacy is the continued fascination with his persona. His story transcends national borders and historical periods, and it remains as relevant today as it was in the 13th century. His legend continues to inspire not only the people of Mongolia but also people around the world, who see in him a symbol of overcoming adversity, breaking down barriers, and achieving greatness. In Mongolia, Genghis Khan's mythic status is more than just a symbol of the past. It is a living, breathing part of the nation's present and future. His image is carried forward in the hearts of the Mongol people, who see themselves as the heirs to his legacy. As Mongolia continues to assert its place on the global stage, Genghis Khan's legacy will remain a central part of its identity, guiding the nation as it moves forward into the future. The myth of Genghis Khan is not a static thing. It evolves, adapts, and grows with each passing generation. Whether as a warrior, a ruler, or a symbol of national pride, Genghis Khan's legacy continues to resonate throughout history, reminding us all of the extraordinary power of one individual to change the world. The rise of the Mongol Empire under Genghis Khan was not only marked by its unparalleled territorial expansion but also by the revolutionary military strategies and tactics that Genghis Khan introduced to warfare. His ability to adapt, innovate, and lead with unyielding precision would set the Mongols apart from any military force in history. The Mongol army, with its lightning-fast cavalry, sophisticated intelligence network, and disciplined structure, was a force unlike any other the world had ever seen. At the heart of Genghis Khan's military success was his deep understanding of the psychological and logistical aspects of warfare. He knew that to conquer such vast territories, the Mongols needed more than just brute force. They needed speed, strategy, and the ability to outthink their enemies at every turn. From his early campaigns against the rival Mongol tribes to his later conquests in the Middle East and Europe, Genghis Khan demonstrated an uncanny ability to turn the tides of battle in his favor. One of his most brilliant innovations was his use of the Mongol cavalry. The Mongols were a nomadic people, accustomed to life on horseback, and Genghis Khan recognized early on that their mobility would be their greatest advantage in warfare. The Mongol cavalry was light, fast, and highly maneuverable, allowing them to strike swiftly and retreat just as quickly, often leaving their enemies disoriented and vulnerable. But it wasn't just the speed of the Mongol cavalry that made them formidable, it was their tactics. Genghis Khan perfected the art of feigned retreats, a strategy in which his forces would appear to flee in disarray, only to lure the enemy into a trap. This tactic, known as the false retreat, was used to great effect in numerous battles, particularly in the decisive conquest of the Khwarezmian Empire. By feigning defeat, the Mongols would lead their enemies into pursuit, only to ambush them when they least expected it. This psychological warfare, combined with the precision of their cavalry, made the Mongol army nearly invincible on the battlefield. Another key element of Genghis Khan's military genius was his use of intelligence and reconnaissance. The Mongols were pioneers in military espionage, relying on a vast network of spies and scouts to gather crucial information about their enemies. These scouts would often infiltrate enemy camps, gather intelligence, and even spread disinformation to confuse their opponents. Genghis Khan's ability to outsmart his enemies and anticipate their movements gave the Mongols a strategic edge that few other armies could match. Moreover, Genghis Khan's army was structured in a way that ensured both flexibility and discipline. The Mongols were divided into units known as tumans, each consisting of 10,000 soldiers. Each tuman was further divided into smaller units, allowing for rapid redeployment and precise coordination during battle. The hierarchical structure of the army ensured that every soldier knew their role, and the level of discipline within the Mongol forces was unparalleled. Each soldier was trained in the use of a variety of weapons, including bows, swords, and lances, and they were expected to be able to fight in a variety of terrains and conditions. But perhaps one of Genghis Khan's most important military innovations was his approach to siege warfare. While the Mongols were famed for their cavalry and lightning-fast raids, they also proved themselves to be masters of siege tactics. Genghis Khan understood that in order to conquer cities, the Mongols needed to adapt to the challenges of urban warfare. To this end, he adopted a range of siege techniques from other cultures, including the use of catapults, siege towers, and even gunpowder. The Mongols were known for their ability to quickly build siege weapons and lay siege to cities with remarkable efficiency, often overwhelming fortified positions that seemed impenetrable. One of the most famous examples of Genghis Khan's use of siege tactics was the siege of the city of Samarkand in 1220, a key event in his campaign against the Khwarezmian Empire. Samarkand, a thriving metropolis, was known for its formidable walls and defenses, yet Genghis Khan's forces were able to breach the city after just a few months. His engineers constructed sophisticated siege weapons, and his soldiers, though primarily mounted, adapted to the new style of warfare with discipline and ingenuity. The fall of Samarkand marked a turning point in Genghis Khan's campaign and demonstrated his ability to overcome the technological and geographical challenges that other armies would have faltered against. However, it wasn't just Genghis Khan's military innovations that set him apart, it was also his ability to inspire loyalty and devotion among his troops. The Mongol army was known for its strict discipline, but it was also known for its remarkable unity. Genghis Khan instilled a deep sense of brotherhood and camaraderie among his soldiers, often rewarding loyalty and punishing disobedience with equal severity. His leadership style was characterized by a combination of respect, fear, and admiration. Soldiers who demonstrated valor in battle were often rewarded with riches and land, while those who showed cowardice or betrayal were swiftly executed. This system of meritocracy, combined with Genghis Khan's personal charisma, ensured that his army remained cohesive and highly motivated, even in the face of overwhelming odds. But Genghis Khan's military genius was not just about battlefield tactics. It was also about his vision for a world shaped by Mongol power. His conquests were not merely about territorial expansion, they were about creating a new world order. His policies of religious tolerance, his promotion of trade and commerce, and his ability to incorporate conquered peoples into his empire helped to stabilize and sustain the vast territories he had conquered. The Mongols were not just warriors, they were administrators, diplomats, and innovators who sought to build a lasting empire, one that would endure long after Genghis Khan's death. In the centuries that followed Genghis Khan's death, his military innovations continued to influence armies around the world. His tactics were studied by military leaders and scholars, and his strategies were adopted and adapted by nations far beyond the borders of the Mongol Empire. The Mongols' use of speed, psychological warfare, and intelligence would become staples of modern warfare, and Genghis Khan's legacy as a military genius would endure for centuries. Even today, Genghis Khan's influence can be seen in the strategies employed by armies around the world. His ability to adapt, innovate, and outthink his enemies continues to serve as a model for military leaders, and his tactics remain a subject of study in military academies across the globe. As we look back on Genghis Khan's military achievements, we are reminded that his success was not just the result of his own brilliance but also the product of a society and a people that were uniquely suited to the demands of warfare. The Mongol Empire, forged in the fires of conquest, was not simply an empire built on military might. It was an empire that changed the very nature of warfare and set the stage for the future of global conflict. Genghis Khan was not just a conqueror and a military genius. He was also an innovative leader and a ruler who understood the importance of governance. His empire, which spanned from the Pacific Ocean to the heart of Europe, was one of the most diverse in history. It encompassed a multitude of cultures, languages, religions, and peoples. To unite such a vast and disparate empire, Genghis Khan knew that military strength alone would not suffice. Effective governance and the integration of diverse cultures were crucial to the survival of his empire. At the core of Genghis Khan's governance was his belief in meritocracy. Unlike many rulers of his time, Genghis Khan did not favor noble birth or aristocratic lineage when it came to assigning positions of power. Instead, he promoted individuals based on their abilities, loyalty, and performance. This system of meritocracy not only allowed talented individuals from across his empire to rise to positions of authority but also helped create a cohesive and efficient administrative structure. The Mongol Empire was vast, spanning across the lands of the Khitans, the Jurchens, the Uyghurs, and many others. To manage this enormous expanse, Genghis Khan established a system of governance that relied on the delegation of power to trusted generals, officials, and advisors. Each region of the empire was overseen by a governor who was responsible for maintaining order, collecting taxes, and ensuring the smooth operation of the state. These governors were often chosen for their military prowess, administrative skills, or loyalty to the Khan. But Genghis Khan also recognized that the key to maintaining control over such a diverse empire was not just through military might or centralized administration. It was through the establishment of a common set of laws. To this end, he introduced the Yasa, a legal code that governed all aspects of Mongol life, from the behavior of soldiers on the battlefield to the conduct of civilians in everyday life. The Yasa was not a rigid set of laws but a flexible system that could adapt to the needs of the empire. It emphasized discipline, loyalty, and respect for authority, and it applied to all people within the empire, regardless of their ethnicity or religion. The Yasa also played a key role in ensuring the Mongol military remained cohesive and efficient. It regulated the behavior of soldiers, setting strict guidelines for the treatment of prisoners of war, the division of spoils, and the conduct of campaigns. Under the Yasa, soldiers were expected to be loyal, disciplined, and respectful, and any act of betrayal or dishonor was punished severely. This strict adherence to the law ensured that the Mongol army remained one of the most formidable fighting forces in the world. Yet, despite the rigid discipline imposed by the Yasa, Genghis Khan was also remarkably flexible when it came to the cultural and religious practices of the people he conquered. His policy of religious tolerance was one of the defining features of his reign. Genghis Khan understood that the strength of his empire lay in the cooperation of its diverse peoples, and he knew that allowing them to practice their own religions would help maintain stability and foster loyalty. In contrast to many other conquerors of the time, who sought to impose their own beliefs upon their subjects, Genghis Khan allowed religious freedom throughout his empire. Whether a person was a Buddhist, Muslim, Christian, or follower of any other faith, they were free to worship as they pleased. This policy of religious tolerance not only helped to maintain peace within the empire but also allowed Genghis Khan to forge alliances with various religious groups and leaders, many of whom provided valuable support during his campaigns. This openness to different cultures and religions extended beyond mere tolerance. Genghis Khan actively sought the advice and expertise of scholars, diplomats, and religious leaders from across the world. He invited experts from China, Persia, and the Islamic world to his court, where they helped to shape the policies of the empire. The Mongols were keen students of the cultures they encountered, and Genghis Khan himself was fascinated by the writings, sciences, and philosophies of the civilizations he conquered. Under his rule, the Mongol Empire became a melting pot of ideas, and Genghis Khan ensured that his court was a place of intellectual exchange, where the best minds from all corners of the empire could gather and share their knowledge. In addition to his policy of religious tolerance, Genghis Khan also encouraged trade and cultural exchange across his empire. One of his most significant achievements was the establishment of the Pax Mongolica, or Mongol peace, which allowed for the safe and efficient movement of goods, ideas, and people across the Silk Road. Under Mongol rule, the once fragmented and dangerous trade routes that stretched from China to Europe became a thriving network of commerce and cultural exchange. Genghis Khan's control over these routes allowed merchants, scholars, and diplomats to travel freely, leading to an unprecedented flow of goods and ideas between East and West. The Pax Mongolica also facilitated the spread of technologies, including paper, gunpowder, and printing, from China to Europe. This exchange of knowledge and technology had a profound impact on the development of European civilization and helped pave the way for the Renaissance. Likewise, the Mongols introduced European goods, such as wool and glass, into China and the Middle East, fostering a two-way exchange that benefited all parties involved. But Genghis Khan's innovations in governance were not limited to trade and cultural exchange. He also instituted a system of postal relays that helped to connect the far-flung regions of his empire. Known as the Yam, this postal system allowed for rapid communication across the empire, enabling Genghis Khan and his generals to stay in touch with their forces even when they were thousands of miles apart. The Yam relied on a network of relay stations, where fresh horses and riders would be waiting to carry messages to their destinations. This system of communication was unparalleled in its efficiency and allowed the Mongols to coordinate their vast empire with remarkable precision. Despite the challenges of ruling such a vast and diverse empire, Genghis Khan's policies of meritocracy, religious tolerance, and cultural integration allowed the Mongol Empire to flourish. The stability provided by the Pax Mongolica, the rule of law under the Yasa, and the openness to different cultures and ideas helped to create an environment where trade, diplomacy, and intellectual exchange could thrive. Even after Genghis Khan's death, his descendants continued to uphold many of his policies, ensuring that his empire remained one of the most culturally and administratively advanced empires of its time. The Mongols' ability to govern such a vast and diverse empire with relatively few rebellions is a testament to Genghis Khan's brilliance as a ruler. His ability to balance military power with cultural and administrative ingenuity set him apart from many other conquerors of his time. Today, Genghis Khan's policies of governance continue to be studied by historians and political leaders alike. His ability to unite and govern a diverse empire remains a remarkable achievement, and his legacy as a ruler who embraced both military conquest and cultural integration is one that has left an indelible mark on history. As the Mongol Empire expanded, reaching its zenith under Genghis Khan's rule, the great leader began to face the challenges that accompanied the weight of absolute power and an empire stretching across the known world. The last years of Genghis Khan's life were marked by both triumph and tribulation, as the aging conqueror sought to solidify his legacy and ensure the future stability of the vast empire he had forged. Genghis Khan, now in his late 60s, had already accomplished what no ruler before him had dared to dream. He had created the largest contiguous empire the world had ever known. Yet, even as his military campaigns continued to push further westward, there were personal challenges that tested the resolve of the aging Khan. Among these challenges was the matter of succession: who would inherit the mantle of the great leader and continue the legacy of Mongol dominance? Despite the uncertainty surrounding his heirs, Genghis Khan had long been preparing his sons for leadership. His eldest son, Jebe, had already proven his mettle in battle and was a trusted commander in his father's campaigns. Yet, as with all of Genghis Khan's children, Jebe faced the daunting task of living up to the formidable reputation of his father. Though the Mongol Empire was structured around meritocracy, Genghis Khan's sons were still expected to demonstrate their leadership skills and prove themselves worthy of the empire's throne. In the last few years of his life, Genghis Khan continued to lead his armies with the same fierce determination that had marked his youth. He remained involved in military campaigns, overseeing the ongoing conquest of the Khwarezmian Empire and engaging in further battles against the Yuan Dynasty in northern China. But, as with many great leaders, the toll of years of constant warfare began to weigh heavily on the once indomitable Khan. In 1227, while preparing for an expedition to the Western Territories, an area still largely uncharted by the Mongols, Genghis Khan fell gravely ill. The exact cause of his death remains a subject of debate, with some historians speculating that he died from wounds sustained during an earlier battle, while others suggest a more natural cause, such as a stroke or a fall from his horse. Whatever the cause, his death marked the end of an era for the Mongol Empire. As Genghis Khan lay dying, the future of the Mongol Empire hung in the balance. The question of succession had been a delicate one, with several of his sons vying for control over different territories within the empire. His chosen successor, his third son, Ogedai, was named as the new Great Khan, but this was not without controversy. The challenge of uniting the vast empire under one leader was an immense task, and Genghis Khan's death would set into motion a series of events that would determine the future of the Mongol world. Ogedai Khan, Genghis Khan's designated heir, assumed the role of Great Khan following his father's death, but his reign was not without challenges. He was tasked with holding together an empire that was so vast, so diverse, that it often seemed unmanageable. The sheer size of the empire, combined with the varying needs and ambitions of the Mongol generals, tribal leaders, and conquered peoples, made governance a constant struggle. Ogedai's reign saw both victories and failures, but it was during his leadership that the Mongol Empire experienced its greatest territorial expansion. Ogedai continued his father's conquests, sending his generals westward into Europe, where they laid siege to cities and ravaged kingdoms. Yet, as with all things, the Mongol Empire faced its own internal divisions, and the question of how to govern such a sprawling empire became increasingly difficult. After Ogedai's death in 1241, the empire split into several khanates, each ruled by one of Genghis Khan's descendants, but the lack of central leadership eventually led to fragmentation and eventual decline. Despite the political turbulence following Genghis Khan's death, the legacy of his empire continued to shape the world for centuries. His conquests had forever altered the geopolitical landscape, creating new trade routes, spreading new technologies, and fostering a cultural exchange that would continue to influence Europe, Asia, and the Middle East for generations. Under the Mongols, the Silk Road flourished, and ideas, goods, and technologies moved freely between East and West. It was during this time that Europe was introduced to Chinese inventions like paper and gunpowder, innovations that would play a critical role in shaping the future of European civilization. The influence of the Mongols, however, was not just economic. The spread of Mongol rule also had profound effects on the cultural and intellectual exchanges between the East and West. As Mongol leaders embraced religious tolerance and promoted learning, the empire became a crossroads of ideas, fostering a rich environment of scholarly pursuit and artistic expression. In the centuries that followed Genghis Khan's death, his name and his legacy would become legend. The Mongol Empire, despite its fragmentation and eventual collapse, remained a symbol of military might, cultural integration, and administrative innovation. To this day, Genghis Khan is remembered as one of the most successful and influential rulers in world history. But his legacy is complex. For many, he is seen as a brutal conqueror, a man who inflicted unimaginable suffering upon those who resisted Mongol rule. The cities he destroyed, the millions of lives lost during his campaigns, and the terror he instilled in his enemies left an indelible scar across much of Asia and Eastern Europe. Yet, for others, Genghis Khan is a symbol of unification, a ruler who brought order to a fragmented world, laying the foundations for trade, cultural exchange, and the advancement of civilization. Even today, Genghis Khan's impact can be seen in many aspects of modern life. His empire paved the way for the creation of the modern world in ways that are often overlooked. The interconnectedness of nations, the spread of ideas and technologies, and the influence of Mongol law and governance are all part of the lasting legacy that Genghis Khan left behind. As we look back on the life of Genghis Khan, we are reminded that his story is not one of simple conquest. It is a story of vision, ambition, and resilience, a story of a man who, against all odds, carved an empire out of the steppes and changed the course of history. And even though the empire he built may have eventually crumbled, the impact of his reign continues to resonate across the world, as his name remains synonymous with both fear and admiration, power and wisdom. Genghis Khan, a name that still echoes through the annals of history, left an indelible mark on the world, a mark that transcends the boundaries of time and geography. Though the Mongol Empire he built ultimately fragmented and fell, its influence continues to reverberate through the centuries, shaping the world in ways both seen and unseen. The legacy of Genghis Khan is as vast as the empire he created, a legacy that touches every corner of the globe and continues to shape the modern world. At the heart of Genghis Khan's enduring legacy lies his unprecedented ability to unite a vast and diverse range of peoples under a single banner. Through his conquests, he brought together people from Central Asia, China, the Middle East, and Europe, creating a global network of trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange that would forever alter the course of history. Under his rule, the Mongol Empire became a symbol of military might, but also of cooperation, as it enabled unprecedented levels of communication and interaction between cultures that had once been isolated from one another. The Pax Mongolica, or Mongol peace, was one of the greatest achievements of Genghis Khan's empire. By establishing a unified political structure across a vast portion of Eurasia, the Mongols brought stability to what had been a fragmented and dangerous landscape. This peace allowed merchants, scholars, and diplomats to travel freely along the Silk Road, a vital artery for trade and cultural exchange that connected East and West. It was during this time that goods, technologies, and ideas flowed more freely than ever before. The Silk Road, which had once been a fragmented series of trade routes, became a continuous, thriving network under Mongol rule. Genghis Khan's empire enabled the safe passage of commodities like silk, spices, and precious metals, but it also allowed for the transmission of groundbreaking technologies. The Mongols facilitated the spread of Chinese inventions such as gunpowder, printing, and papermaking to Europe, where they would later play a crucial role in the development of modern science and technology. Similarly, the Mongol Empire helped spread agricultural innovations, including the introduction of new crops to different regions, transforming diets and economies across continents. But the impact of Genghis Khan's empire was not limited to the exchange of goods and technologies. His reign also helped foster the exchange of knowledge and ideas. Under Mongol rule, scholars from different cultures and religions, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, and Confucian, came into contact with one another, sharing their philosophies, scientific discoveries, and religious texts. This intellectual exchange, which had been impossible in earlier centuries, helped lay the foundation for the Renaissance in Europe, the Enlightenment, and the scientific revolution. In fact, many scholars argue that without the Mongol Empire's unification of East and West, the intellectual and cultural developments of the late medieval and early modern periods would have been significantly delayed. Genghis Khan's policy of religious tolerance was also a crucial element of his legacy. The Mongol Empire, under his rule, was home to a staggering diversity of religious beliefs. The Mongols themselves practiced a form of shamanism, but they allowed their subjects to worship freely, whether they were Buddhist, Muslim, Christian, or adherents of other faiths. This policy not only kept the empire stable but also encouraged the exchange of religious ideas and practices. Genghis Khan's respect for religious diversity was a key factor in his success as a ruler, and remains a remarkable aspect of his legacy. Yet, the legacy of Genghis Khan is not without its darker aspects. His conquests were brutal, and the destruction of cities such as Samarkand, Baghdad, and Nishapur, as well as the mass slaughter of civilians during his campaigns, left a legacy of fear and suffering. The sheer scale of the Mongol invasions, coupled with the use of terror as a weapon, has led some to view Genghis Khan as a ruthless and bloodthirsty conqueror. Indeed, the Mongol approach to warfare was one of unparalleled ferocity. Whole populations were annihilated, cities were razed to the ground, and countless lives were lost in the wake of the Mongol conquests. However, it is important to remember that Genghis Khan's empire was not just a product of violence and war. It was also a product of governance, vision, and innovation. His policies of meritocracy, his establishment of the Yasa, a legal code, and his ability to integrate and govern a diverse empire set him apart from many other conquerors in history. He may have used terror as a tool of war, but he also built an empire that fostered trade, communication, and cultural exchange on a scale never before seen. The Mongol legacy also extends to the political systems that followed in their wake. While the Mongol Empire itself eventually fragmented into several khanates, the political structures that Genghis Khan implemented influenced future empires, including the Russian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and the Chinese Qing Dynasty. The Mongols' ability to govern such a vast and diverse territory, and their incorporation of local administrative practices, set a precedent for future rulers who sought to manage large empires. Even in the modern era, Genghis Khan's legacy continues to inspire. His name is revered in Mongolia, where he is considered a national hero and symbol of strength, unity, and pride. Monuments to Genghis Khan, including the massive statue near Ulaanbaatar, stand as a testament to his lasting importance in the Mongolian consciousness. In recent years, there has been a resurgence of interest in Genghis Khan in both academic and popular circles, with historians, filmmakers, and authors revisiting his life and legacy. Moreover, Genghis Khan's influence extends far beyond Mongolia. His impact on the world's history is undeniable. He shaped the political, economic, and cultural landscapes of Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. His empire brought together people from different parts of the world, fostering the exchange of ideas, technologies, and goods. Today, we can trace many aspects of the modern world, global trade, international diplomacy, and cultural exchange, to the actions of one man and the empire he built. In the end, Genghis Khan's legacy is a complex one. He was both a visionary leader who built an empire of unprecedented scale and a brutal conqueror whose actions left scars across the globe. But it is this duality that makes his legacy so fascinating and enduring. Genghis Khan remains one of history's most extraordinary figures, and his empire, though gone, continues to shape the world in ways that are still felt today. The death of Genghis Khan in 1227 marked the end of an era for the Mongol Empire. His passing was not just the loss of a powerful leader, but the beginning of a series of struggles that would ultimately lead to the empire's fragmentation. Though Genghis Khan had established a vast, unified empire stretching across Eurasia, his death left behind a vacuum of power, a vacuum that his descendants, divided by ambition, rivalry, and personal loyalties, would struggle to fill. Genghis Khan had been a force of nature, a leader whose vision, military genius, and unyielding will had held together a sprawling empire. But his death shattered the unity he had carefully constructed. The succession, which had been the subject of considerable tension even during his lifetime, became a source of deep division among his sons and generals. The question of who would succeed Genghis Khan had always been a delicate one. Although the great Khan had appointed his third son, Ogidi, as his successor, the vast empire he left behind was not a simple inheritance. It was a complex web of lands, peoples, and powers, each governed by different factions within the Mongol family. Genghis Khan's descendants, each with their own ambitions, were now left to navigate the fragmented empire. Ogidi, who had been named the official successor, took control of the Mongol Empire after his father's death. His reign began with promise as he continued the conquests that Genghis Khan had begun, expanding the empire into Europe and the Middle East. But while Ogidi's rule was marked by several significant victories, it also laid the groundwork for the empire's eventual fragmentation. As Ogidi expanded the Mongol Empire, the challenges of managing such a vast territory became increasingly apparent. The Mongol rulers, although united under the title of Great Khan, were divided by their own personal interests, tribal loyalties, and territorial ambitions. The sons of Genghis Khan, though bound by blood, were frequently at odds with one another. The complex relationships within the Mongol royal family led to internal struggles for power, with various factions vying for dominance. In 1241, as Ogidi continued his campaigns in Europe, his sudden death sent shockwaves throughout the Mongol Empire. His death created an immediate crisis of leadership. The empire was left without a clear ruler, and the question of succession would lead to years of political turmoil and infighting. Ogidi's death set the stage for a power struggle between the various factions within the Mongol royal family, as each sought to secure control of the empire. Ogidi's death also highlighted the challenges of ruling a decentralized empire. The Mongol system of governance, based on loyalty to the Great Khan and the need for military conquest, was effective as long as there was a strong and unified leadership. However, with the death of the Great Khan, the central authority began to crumble, and the various khanates that had been established during Genghis Khan's reign began to assert their independence. At this time, the Mongol Empire began to split into separate khanates, each ruled by a different branch of the royal family. The four major khanates that emerged were the Ilkhanate, which ruled over Persia, the Golden Horde, which controlled Russia and parts of Eastern Europe, the Chagatai Khanate, which governed Central Asia, and the Yuan Dynasty in China, established by Kublai Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson. Each of these khanates operated as independent entities, with their own rulers, policies, and ambitions. Despite the division, the legacy of Genghis Khan continued to shape the political and cultural landscape of Eurasia. The khanates, though separate, were still bound by a common heritage, and the influence of the Mongol Empire persisted across the lands they had once conquered. The Mongol rulers, though no longer united under a single banner, continued to maintain many of the administrative and military practices that had been established by Genghis Khan. However, the fragmentation of the empire also led to significant internal strife. The Mongol rulers, each seeking to expand their own territories, engaged in numerous wars and conflicts, both with one another and with outside powers. The once unified Mongol Empire was now divided by rivalries and ambitions, and the cohesiveness that had made it such a powerful force began to erode. One of the most significant divisions within the empire was between Kublai Khan, who ruled the Yuan Dynasty in China, and his cousins in the Western Khanates. Kublai, Genghis Khan's grandson, had established himself as the ruler of China and had consolidated Mongol power in the region. However, his cousins, particularly in the Ilkhanate and the Golden Horde, resisted his authority, leading to conflicts between the various branches of the Mongol family. These divisions would continue to hinder the Mongols' ability to maintain their empire and eventually contributed to its downfall. Over time, the Mongol Empire began to decline. The power struggles between the khanates, combined with external pressures from rising empires like the Russians and the Ming Dynasty in China, weakened the Mongol state. In China, the Yuan Dynasty was eventually overthrown by the native Ming Dynasty, and in Persia, the Ilkhanate fell to local dynasties. The Golden Horde, although still a significant force, gradually lost its influence over Eastern Europe, and the Chagatai Khanate fragmented into smaller states. The decline of the Mongol Empire was not immediate. It took several centuries for the various khanates to fully collapse. However, by the late 14th century, the once great empire had fractured beyond repair. The empire's collapse was not merely the result of internal conflicts, it was also the product of changing political, economic, and social conditions. The Mongols, who had once been unstoppable warriors, were now facing new challenges that their systems of governance and military strategies were ill-equipped to handle. Yet, even in its decline, the Mongol Empire left behind a lasting legacy. The political, economic, and cultural exchanges that were made possible by Mongol rule had a profound impact on the regions they had conquered. The Silk Road continued to thrive, even after the Mongols' fall, and the influence of Mongol governance can still be seen in the political structures of later empires. The Mongol contributions to military tactics, governance, and trade would continue to influence the course of history long after the empire had fractured. In the end, the fragmentation of the Mongol Empire was inevitable. The vastness of the territories, the ambition of Genghis Khan's descendants, and the complexity of governing such a diverse empire made it impossible to maintain unity for long. Yet, despite the eventual collapse of the empire, the impact of Genghis Khan's reign endures to this day. The empire he built may have fractured, but its legacy continues to shape the world in ways that are still felt today. As the 14th century unfolded, the once mighty Mongol Empire, which had spanned the vast expanse of Eurasia, began to show signs of decay. The world that Genghis Khan had forged, a world of unprecedented unity, military prowess, and cultural exchange, began to crumble under the weight of internal divisions, economic instability, and external pressures. The fall of the Mongol Empire was not a singular event but rather a slow, agonizing decline that unfolded over decades, leaving behind an empire that had once seemed invincible. The decline of the Mongol Empire was marked by a series of interconnected factors, both external and internal. One of the primary reasons for the empire's fragmentation was the continuing division among Genghis Khan's descendants. The once unified Mongol leadership, which had been able to maintain control over vast territories, now found itself divided into separate, competing khanates. These khanates, each with its own ruler, competed for power, wealth, and territory. The central authority of the Great Khan had weakened, and the once powerful Mongol family was no longer able to unite the empire under a single banner. The rivalry between the various branches of Genghis Khan's descendants, particularly between Kublai Khan's Yuan Dynasty in China and the Ilkhanate in Persia, deepened the rifts within the empire. Each khanate sought to expand its territory and influence, often at the expense of the others. The lack of central coordination meant that the Mongols were no longer able to maintain the unity and strength that had made them such a formidable force in the 13th century. In addition to the infighting, the empire also faced an economic crisis. The Mongol Empire had been built on conquest, and its wealth had largely come from plundering the riches of the lands it conquered. However, as the empire expanded, maintaining control over these vast territories became increasingly difficult. The Mongol system of governance, which had relied on military conquest and the loyalty of local leaders, was no longer effective. The khanates struggled to manage their territories, and the empire's vast network of trade routes, which had once fueled its economy, began to falter. In China, the Yuan Dynasty, which had once been the jewel of the Mongol Empire, faced widespread discontent among its population. The Mongols, though successful in military conquest, were foreigners in China, and their rule was never fully accepted by the Chinese people. Economic difficulties, widespread corruption, and natural disasters, including devastating floods and famines, exacerbated the social unrest. The Yuan dynasty's inability to address these issues led to a growing rebellion among the Chinese peasantry, culminating in the rise of the Ming dynasty. The Ming forces eventually overthrew the Mongols in 1368, marking the end of Mongol rule in China. In the western territories of the empire, the Ilkhanate, which had controlled Persia, also faced economic decline and internal strife. The Ilkhanate was plagued by succession crises, as rival factions within the Mongol ruling family fought for control. The region also faced pressure from the rising powers of the Timurids in Central Asia and the Ottoman Empire in the west. In the mid-14th century, the Ilkhanate collapsed, and Persia was once again fragmented into smaller, warring states. The Golden Horde, which had once ruled over Russia and Eastern Europe, was similarly weakened by internal conflicts. The Mongol Khans of the Golden Horde struggled to maintain control over their vast territory, and in the 15th century, the Principality of Moscow began to assert its independence. The Grand Duchy of Moscow, under Ivan III, gradually pushed back against Mongol rule, and in 1480, the Mongols were finally expelled from Russia, marking the collapse of the Golden Horde. In Central Asia, the Chagatai Khanate, which had once controlled the heart of the Mongol Empire, was fragmented into smaller states, each struggling for power. The region became a battleground for various warlords and conquerors, including the Timurid dynasty founded by the legendary Timur, who sought to revive the Mongol legacy but ultimately failed to restore the empire. The external pressures on the Mongol Empire also played a significant role in its collapse. As the empire weakened, neighboring powers began to take advantage of its instability. The rise of powerful regional states, such as the Ottomans, the Mamluks, and the rising Russian principalities, exploited the Mongols' decline and chipped away at their empire. The Mongols, once a fearsome and unstoppable force, were now unable to defend their territories against these emerging powers. But perhaps the most significant external challenge came from the Ming dynasty in China. Following the collapse of the Yuan Dynasty, the Ming sought to reclaim their ancestral homeland from the Mongols. The Ming army launched a series of campaigns to drive the Mongols out of China, culminating in the capture of the Mongol capital at Xanadu in 1368. This loss marked the end of Mongol rule in China and further fragmented the empire. The fall of the Mongol Empire was a slow and painful process, but by the late 14th century, the once great empire had been reduced to a series of fractured khanates, each struggling for survival. The Mongols, who had once ruled a vast and unified empire, were now a shadow of their former selves, with only remnants of their power and influence remaining. By the 15th century, the Mongol Empire was essentially gone, its territories absorbed by emerging states and regional powers. Yet, even in its decline, the Mongol Empire left behind a legacy that would shape the future of Eurasia. The empire's impact on trade, culture, and military strategy continued to influence the course of history long after the Mongols had been driven from their conquests. The Mongol conquests had opened up new routes for trade and communication, and the legacy of the Silk Road continued to shape the exchange of goods and ideas between East and West. The Mongols had also introduced new military tactics, which were adopted by later empires and armies. The fall of the Mongol Empire marked the end of an era of conquest and expansion, but the legacy of Genghis Khan and his successors endured. While the empire itself may have crumbled, the influence of the Mongols can still be seen in the political, cultural, and economic landscapes of Eurasia. The rise and fall of the Mongol Empire is a testament to the fleeting nature of power, but also to the enduring impact of the empire that Genghis Khan built. The Mongols, who had once seemed invincible, were eventually swept away by the forces of history. Yet their empire, and the world they created, remains a central chapter in the story of Eurasia. The fall of the Mongol Empire, like its rise, was a dramatic and transformative event in world history. As the Mongol Empire faded into history, its legacy endured in ways both profound and enduring. Though the empire itself collapsed in the 14th and 15th centuries, the influence of Genghis Khan and his descendants left an indelible mark on the world, shaping the course of history for centuries to come. The Mongols were not just conquerors, they were builders of empires, creators of bridges between cultures, and catalysts for global exchange. Their legacy can be seen across the vast landscapes they once ruled, in the cities they established, the trade routes they fostered, and the new ideas and technologies they spread across Eurasia. The Mongol conquests, although devastating in their immediate effects, played a pivotal role in the creation of one of the most enduring systems of global trade in human history, the Silk Road. Under the Mongols, the once fragmented and often perilous trade routes between East and West were brought under a single, unified administration. With their control over such vast territories, the Mongols ensured that goods, people, and ideas could move more freely than ever before. The Pax Mongolica, or Mongol Peace, was a period of relative stability and security across much of Eurasia, where traders could travel vast distances without fear of attack or banditry. The Mongols created a system of diplomatic missions, established common trade policies, and provided protection for merchants along the Silk Road. This facilitated the exchange of goods, from silk, porcelain, and spices to precious metals and textiles, creating a flourishing of cross-cultural interactions. But the impact of the Mongol Empire was not limited to trade alone. The Mongols facilitated the exchange of knowledge in ways that reshaped the intellectual landscape of the world. The movement of scholars, scientists, and artisans across the empire allowed for the transmission of technologies, ideas, and innovations from one region to another. Perhaps one of the most important contributions was the Mongol role in the transmission of gunpowder technology. Originally invented in China, gunpowder and its associated weapons, such as rockets, bombs, and firearms, spread to the west through Mongol conquests. The Mongols, who were keen on adopting and enhancing military technologies, played a key role in the transfer of this knowledge to the Middle East and Europe. The spread of gunpowder fundamentally transformed warfare, altering the balance of power between nations and empires for centuries to come. Along with gunpowder, the Mongols were instrumental in transmitting other innovations. Papermaking, for example, was another Chinese invention that spread westward through Mongol rule. The Mongols, who had embraced Chinese technologies and administrative practices, ensured that these innovations reached Persia, the Arab world, and eventually Europe, where they revolutionized the dissemination of knowledge. The proliferation of books, coupled with the spread of printing techniques, laid the groundwork for the intellectual revolutions of the Renaissance and the subsequent scientific revolution. The Mongol Empire also played a role in the spread of religions across Eurasia. Although the Mongols themselves practiced a variety of belief systems, including Tengriism, Buddhism, and Islam, they were famously tolerant of other religions and encouraged the exchange of ideas. The Mongol rulers often supported missionaries, allowing Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism to spread across their empire. In particular, the Mongol Khans in Persia adopted Islam, which helped solidify the religion's presence in Central Asia and the wider region. One of the most striking features of Mongol governance was their approach to administration. The Mongols, having conquered a wide range of diverse peoples, developed a highly pragmatic and inclusive system of rule. They were less concerned with the cultural or religious practices of their subjects than with the efficiency of governance. This allowed them to govern a vast empire composed of different peoples with relative stability. Their system of merit-based appointments, reliance on local administrators, and use of skilled bureaucrats from conquered lands were key to maintaining control over such a large and varied empire. The Mongols also facilitated the spread of art and culture. They patronized a wide array of artistic traditions, blending the aesthetics of their own nomadic culture with those of the civilizations they conquered. Mongol art, architecture, and literature, especially under the Yuan Dynasty, blended Chinese, Persian, and Central Asian styles, creating a new, hybrid cultural heritage that continued to influence subsequent generations. Perhaps one of the most enduring aspects of Mongol influence is seen in the development of modern Russia. The Mongol occupation of Russia, which lasted for several centuries, left deep scars but also contributed significantly to the rise of the Russian state. The Mongols introduced centralized governance, military organization, and a tax system that influenced the development of the Russian Empire. Furthermore, the Mongols played a key role in the rise of the Grand Duchy of Moscow, which would eventually become the Russian Empire under the Tsars. In China, the Mongols also left a lasting impact. Although the Yuan Dynasty was overthrown in 1368, the Mongol legacy in China continued to influence the development of the Ming Dynasty. The Ming Dynasty retained many of the administrative and military practices introduced by the Mongols, and the Mongols' integration of the Silk Road trade routes left China as a major player in global commerce. In Persia, the Mongols contributed to the establishment of the Timurid Empire, a successor state that would continue to be a dominant force in Central Asia. Timur, also known as Tamerlane, claimed to be a descendant of Genghis Khan and sought to revive the Mongol Empire through his own conquests. Although Timur's empire was short-lived, the cultural and architectural contributions of the Timurids, particularly in cities like Samarkand, were lasting and influential. Despite the fragmentation of the Mongol Empire, the impact of its conquests continued to shape the development of empires and states across Eurasia. The Mongols helped establish the foundations for the modern world's geopolitical structure. The trade, cultural exchange, and technological transfer they promoted created the groundwork for the later Renaissance and the globalized world that we know today. The Mongol Empire was a fleeting empire, lasting for less than a century in its unified form, but the legacy of Genghis Khan and his descendants continues to shape the world in ways that are still felt. From the Silk Road to the transfer of gunpowder and the spread of religions, the Mongols forged connections that transcended borders and cultures. Their influence, though often overlooked in mainstream history, was a key element in the development of global history, and it is impossible to understand the evolution of Eurasian civilizations without acknowledging their role in it. As we reflect on the rise and fall of the Mongol Empire, we must also consider the enduring lessons it offers. The Mongols, for all their military prowess and territorial expansion, understood that empire building was not simply about conquests but about governance, cultural exchange, and the creation of lasting connections across vast distances. When we think of the Mongol Empire, one of the first things that comes to mind is the sheer military might of Genghis Khan and his descendants. The Mongols were unrivaled in their ability to wage war, conquer vast territories, and create an empire that stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the heart of Europe. But while their brutal conquests and terrifying reputation as warriors are often remembered, it's the lasting influence of Mongol military strategy and governance that has had an enduring impact on world history. Genghis Khan was not simply a conqueror. He was a brilliant military strategist and tactician whose innovations in warfare reshaped the course of history. His success in battle was not merely due to the size of his armies but because of the ingenuity with which he waged war. At the core of Mongol military doctrine was the principle of speed and mobility. The Mongol army was composed primarily of highly skilled cavalry, each soldier a mounted archer capable of striking with deadly precision while on the move. This made the Mongols almost impossible to defeat in open terrain. The use of cavalry was not new, but the Mongols perfected it. Unlike their enemies, who often relied on slow-moving infantry or heavy, armored knights, the Mongol horsemen were trained to maneuver swiftly, strike suddenly, and retreat before the enemy could retaliate. This lightning-fast hit-and-run style of warfare allowed the Mongols to strike with incredible precision, overwhelming opponents before they had time to react. This was in stark contrast to the siege warfare that many empires used, and the Mongols' ability to deploy mobile armies over vast distances gave them a strategic edge in every theater of war. The Mongol approach to warfare was built on exceptional discipline and coordination. Genghis Khan's army was divided into units based on the decimal system, which made it easier for commanders to organize, manage, and deploy large forces efficiently. A traditional Mongol military unit was the tumen, which consisted of 10,000 soldiers. Each tumen was divided into smaller units, each led by commanders who were held accountable for the performance of their soldiers. The clear hierarchical structure ensured that orders were carried out swiftly, and the Mongol military's ability to respond to changing battlefield conditions was unmatched. But it wasn't just the tactics on the battlefield that made the Mongols successful. Genghis Khan's genius lay in his ability to integrate diverse military cultures into his forces. He incorporated the best elements of the armies he defeated, learning from his enemies and adapting their methods to his own. For example, the Mongols adopted siege technologies from the Chinese, improving their ability to breach fortified cities. Similarly, they incorporated Persian engineers and military commanders into their ranks, allowing them to overcome technological challenges that had previously stymied other armies. One of the most famous examples of Mongol military strategy was the feigned retreat. This tactic involved the Mongol army pretending to flee in defeat, only to lure their enemies into pursuit. Once the pursuing enemy was spread out and disorganized, the Mongols would turn and attack, encircling their foes and defeating them decisively. The feigned retreat was a masterpiece of psychological warfare, as it preyed on the enemy's overconfidence and desire for victory. The Mongols also excelled in the use of psychological warfare. They understood the power of terror, and often employed brutal tactics to intimidate their enemies before battle even began. They would use the threat of mass slaughter to weaken resistance and create a sense of dread. Entire cities were destroyed, and thousands of people were killed, often in the most horrifying ways, as a means of sending a message to other potential adversaries. While this practice certainly contributed to their fearsome reputation, it also demonstrated their understanding of the importance of morale in warfare. Yet, despite their brutal tactics, the Mongols were remarkably efficient in their ability to govern the territories they conquered. Genghis Khan's success was not just due to his military prowess, but also his vision of a pragmatic and centralized system of governance. He recognized that controlling vast territories required more than just military dominance. It required a unified, effective administration. Genghis Khan instituted a series of sweeping reforms that shaped the governance of the Mongol Empire. The Mongols, unlike many other empires of the time, placed a heavy emphasis on merit-based appointments. The traditional feudal system, which was based on noble birth and hereditary privilege, was largely abandoned in favor of a system in which people were promoted based on their ability and loyalty. This allowed Genghis Khan to build a competent bureaucracy from a diverse range of ethnic and cultural backgrounds. One of the most important reforms was the establishment of the Yasa, a legal code that provided the basis for the administration of the empire. The Yasa was a set of laws and rules governing everything from military discipline to taxation, commerce, and even social conduct. It was designed to maintain order in a vast and diverse empire. The Yasa emphasized the importance of loyalty to the Mongol state, as well as the need for fairness and justice in the treatment of all subjects, regardless of their background. The Mongols also made great use of communication and intelligence networks. They created an elaborate system of couriers and messengers who could relay information across vast distances. These couriers, known as the Yam, were stationed at regular intervals along major roads, allowing them to deliver messages swiftly and securely. The Mongols understood the importance of timely intelligence, and they used spies to gather information about enemy movements, weaknesses, and intentions. This allowed them to act with precision, striking where their enemies were weakest. The Mongol legacy in governance also extended beyond their empire. Many of the systems Genghis Khan established would be adopted by future empires and states. The centralized administration, merit-based appointments, and legal codes became models for later rulers, from the Ottoman Empire to the Russian Tsars. In military strategy, the influence of the Mongols can be seen in the armies of the Ottoman Turks, who were inspired by the Mongol use of cavalry and their tactical flexibility. In the West, the Mongols' emphasis on speed, mobility, and coordination would influence the development of modern military doctrine, particularly during the Napoleonic Wars. Even in the 20th century, military leaders such as Erwin Rommel, the famed German general, were inspired by the tactics of Genghis Khan in their approach to armored warfare and rapid maneuver tactics. Furthermore, the Mongols' understanding of psychological warfare and their emphasis on terror would leave a lasting imprint on military strategy throughout history. The idea of using fear as a weapon would be adopted by various regimes, including the Nazis during World War II. In the modern world, Genghis Khan's influence can still be felt. The Mongols' approach to warfare, governance, and even trade laid the groundwork for the development of global systems that are still in place today. The Mongol Empire, at its height, was a force of nature, an unstoppable juggernaut that had swept across the vastness of Asia and into the heart of Europe. For much of the 13th and early 14th centuries, it seemed as though nothing could stand in the way of Genghis Khan's legacy. But like all empires, the Mongols were not immune to the ravages of time, internal strife, and the pressures of the outside world. The mighty empire that had once stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Danube River was fated to fall, its unity shattered by the very forces that had once propelled it to greatness. The decline of the Mongol Empire did not happen overnight, nor was it the result of a single event or cause. Instead, it was a complex and multifaceted process, influenced by internal divisions, external pressures, and the changing dynamics of the world in the centuries after Genghis Khan's death. The first blow to the unity of the Mongol Empire came with the death of its founder in 1227. Genghis Khan had created an empire based not only on military might but also on personal loyalty, centralized power, and a carefully constructed system of governance. His death, however, left a void that his successors struggled to fill. Genghis Khan's sons and grandsons, though capable in their own right, lacked the unifying vision and charismatic leadership of their grandfather. This vacuum of leadership created tensions that would gradually tear the empire apart. In the years following Genghis Khan's death, the empire was divided among his sons, with each inheriting a vast swath of territory. The Mongol Empire was partitioned into 4 major khanates: the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Golden Horde in Russia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Yuan Dynasty in China. While these khanates were nominally united under the Mongol banner, in reality, they were increasingly independent and often at odds with each other. This fragmentation was compounded by the succession disputes that plagued the Mongol leadership. The Mongols, despite their initial emphasis on merit and loyalty, followed the traditional practice of dividing land among heirs. This practice, while it had worked during Genghis Khan's reign, proved disastrous in the generations that followed. The Mongol rulers fought bitterly over succession rights, with rival factions within the royal family constantly challenging each other for power. These internal struggles weakened the central authority and left the empire vulnerable to external threats. Meanwhile, the Mongols' once formidable military power began to wane. The Mongol armies, so dominant in their earlier campaigns, became less effective over time. The reasons for this decline were manifold. First, the Mongols had relied heavily on the swift and highly mobile cavalry that had been their hallmark during Genghis Khan's reign. As the empire expanded, however, the logistical challenges of maintaining such an army over vast distances grew. The Mongol military was stretched thin, and the lack of communication and coordination between the different khanates further eroded their effectiveness. In addition to the internal divisions and military decline, the Mongols faced mounting external pressures. The rise of powerful states and empires, such as the Mamluks in Egypt, the Timurid Empire, and the rising Ottoman Empire, posed serious challenges to Mongol dominance. In the 14th century, the Golden Horde, once a formidable force in Eastern Europe and Russia, began to lose control of its territories. The Ilkhanate in Persia, too, found itself embroiled in internal conflict and unable to fend off rising powers in the region. The Mongols' ability to maintain their empire was also undermined by a series of devastating events. The Black Death, which swept through Europe, Asia, and the Middle East in the mid-14th century, had a catastrophic effect on the Mongol-controlled territories. The plague decimated entire populations, including large portions of the Mongol military and civilian populations. The death toll was staggering, and the Mongols were not immune to its effects. Entire cities were left abandoned, and the economic impact of the plague was felt throughout the empire. In China, the Yuan Dynasty, established by Kublai Khan, faced increasing resistance from native Chinese populations. The Mongols, who had never fully integrated into Chinese society, became increasingly alienated from the local population. The burden of taxation, the growing resentment toward Mongol rule, and natural disasters all contributed to widespread unrest. By the late 14th century, the Yuan dynasty was weakened by peasant revolts, and in 1368, it was overthrown by the Ming dynasty. The fall of the Yuan dynasty marked the beginning of the end for Mongol rule in China. Similarly, in the western parts of the empire, the Golden Horde, once the dominant power in Russia, began to lose its grip on the region. The rise of the Grand Duchy of Moscow, which had been a Mongol vassal state, signaled the decline of Mongol influence in Russia. By the end of the 15th century, the Mongols had been driven from most of their former territories in Eastern Europe, and the Russian Tsardom had emerged as a powerful state in its own right. In Central Asia, the Chagatai Khanate also fell into decline. The region, once a vital crossroads for trade and cultural exchange, became fragmented and vulnerable to external invasions. The rise of Timur or Tamerlane, in the late 14th century, saw the final collapse of Mongol power in the region. Timur, claiming to be a descendant of Genghis Khan, sought to revive the Mongol Empire, but his empire was short-lived and did not have the lasting impact of his ancestors. The final death knell for the Mongol Empire came in the late 14th and early 15th centuries, when the various khanates, weakened by internal division, military decline, and external pressures, gradually faded into history. The Mongols had built one of the largest empires in history, but they had failed to maintain the unity and strength that had made them invincible in the first place. The fragmentation of the empire was inevitable, given the vast size and diversity of the territories it encompassed. The fall of the Mongol Empire was not a sudden event but a slow process of decay that spanned several generations. Yet, despite the collapse, the Mongols' impact on history endured. Their conquests had shaped the course of civilization in ways that would continue to echo for centuries. From the spread of trade and culture along the Silk Road to the dissemination of gunpowder and printing technologies, the Mongol Empire had left an indelible mark on the world. And even in its decline, the empire's legacy lived on, influencing the future of empires and states across Eurasia. Today, the Mongols are remembered not just as conquerors but as empire builders who transformed the world in ways both grand and subtle. The fall of their empire serves as a reminder that no empire, no matter how powerful, is immune to the forces of history. Yet the story of the Mongols is far from one of failure. It is the story of an empire that, for a brief time, connected the world in ways that had never been seen before and, in the process, altered the course of history forever. The Mongol Empire may have faded into the annals of history, but its legacy endures in ways that continue to shape the world today. Though the empire's military might crumbled under the weight of time and division, the cultural and economic exchanges facilitated by Mongol rule left an indelible imprint on global civilization. The empire created a vast, interconnected world, bridging the East and the West, and its influence can still be felt in everything from trade and technology to the cultural fabric of nations. One of the most profound contributions of the Mongol Empire was its role in facilitating the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies across continents. At the height of its power, the Mongol Empire controlled a vast stretch of land that encompassed some of the most important trade routes of the ancient world, the Silk Road. These routes had existed for centuries, but it was under the Pax Mongolica, or Mongol peace, that trade and cultural exchange flourished like never before. The Mongols, particularly during the reign of Genghis Khan's successors, encouraged the movement of merchants, travelers, and scholars across their empire. The Mongols themselves were not only warriors but also avid promoters of trade, commerce, and cultural exchange. Under their rule, the vast territories of the empire were unified, and this unity allowed for the free movement of goods, people, and ideas across regions that had once been separated by centuries of conflict and distrust. This period of relative peace across Eurasia was unprecedented, and it laid the foundation for the flourishing of the Silk Road as a conduit of trade and culture. Goods like silk, spices, precious metals, and textiles flowed from China and the East to Europe, while Western products and knowledge made their way back. The Mongols opened up direct access to goods and innovations that had previously been inaccessible to much of the world. For instance, paper, gunpowder, and printing, technologies that had originated in China, began to spread westward, fundamentally altering the societies they touched. This cultural transmission played a key role in the Renaissance, as the influx of knowledge, technology, and artistic ideas from the East stimulated intellectual and artistic revolutions in Europe. Beyond the exchange of goods and technologies, the Mongols also facilitated the transfer of knowledge and ideas between civilizations. Scholars, diplomats, and missionaries traveled freely within the Mongol Empire, bridging the gap between cultures that had once been divided by centuries of war and isolation. It was during this period that great figures such as Marco Polo made their famous journeys along the Silk Road, bringing back detailed accounts of the vast Mongol Empire. Polo's writings, though often exaggerated, sparked European interest in the East and played a role in stimulating the age of exploration. The Mongols also played a key role in spreading the use of the written word. The Mongol Empire's vast bureaucracy relied heavily on written documents, and the Mongols made efforts to standardize languages and scripts across their realm. The spread of the Persian script and the use of Arabic numerals across the empire became part of the lasting legacy of the Mongol administration. The Mongols' embrace of multiple cultures and their encouragement of intellectual exchange meant that the world was connected in a way it had never been before. While the Mongols promoted trade and cultural exchange, their empire also served as a melting pot for diverse peoples and religions. Genghis Khan himself was religiously tolerant, and under his rule, the Mongols welcomed a variety of religious beliefs, from Buddhism and Islam to Christianity and shamanism. This tolerance fostered a sense of cultural exchange and cooperation among different peoples within the empire, and it allowed for the free exchange of ideas, philosophies, and traditions. The Mongols' policies created a relatively harmonious environment in which religious and cultural diversity could coexist. However, it was not only the Mongols' role as mediators of cultural exchange that left a lasting impact on the world. The rise of the Mongol Empire also brought profound changes to the political landscape of Eurasia. In many cases, the collapse of the Mongol Khanates led to the formation of new states and empires that would continue the legacy of Mongol rule. For instance, in Russia, the Mongol yoke had a significant effect on the development of Russian political institutions. The Mongol domination of the Russian principalities had forced the princes of Moscow to consolidate power, creating the foundations for the rise of the Russian Tsardom. The Mongols also influenced the administrative systems of the Russian Empire, with the Mongol system of taxation and governance serving as a model for later Russian rulers. In Persia, the Ilkhanate left behind a rich cultural legacy. The Mongol rulers of Persia, particularly under the leadership of Hulagu Khan, promoted the arts and supported the development of Persian literature, architecture, and philosophy. The Mongol rule in Persia also facilitated the spread of Islam, as many of the Mongol Khans converted to the faith and patronized Islamic scholars and institutions. The cultural fusion that took place under Mongol rule contributed to the rich artistic and intellectual heritage of the region, which would later influence the Safavid Empire and other Islamic dynasties. In China, the Yuan Dynasty, founded by Kublai Khan, left behind a profound impact on the development of Chinese society. Despite the eventual fall of the Yuan Dynasty, the Mongols introduced new administrative systems, promoted trade, and expanded China's borders. The Mongols also contributed to the development of Chinese literature and the arts, and their rule saw the introduction of new ideas and technologies, including the use of gunpowder in warfare. Though their dynasty was short-lived, the Mongols' influence on China's history continued to resonate long after their departure. Perhaps one of the most lasting effects of the Mongol Empire was the creation of a more interconnected world. By fostering global trade, communication, and cultural exchange, the Mongols laid the groundwork for the formation of a global economy. The movement of goods and ideas across Eurasia during the Mongol era set the stage for the globalized world that we live in today. The Mongol Empire, in many ways, was a precursor to the modern global system, and its influence can be seen in the world's major trade routes, cultural exchanges, and political dynamics. In addition to its influence on trade and culture, the Mongol Empire also left a significant mark on military strategy and tactics. The Mongols were among the first to employ psychological warfare on a grand scale, using fear as a weapon to demoralize their enemies before battle. The Mongol military's emphasis on speed, mobility, and adaptability influenced later armies, including those of the Ottomans and the Europeans during the Renaissance. The Mongol legacy of innovation and adaptation continues to be studied by military historians and strategists today.